A single father working the night shift never expected that helping a rain-soaked stranger would expose a secret worth billions, or put his family in deadly danger. When Jack discovered that the frightened girl he sheltered was actually Emma Harrington, daughter of one of America's most powerful billionaires, their worlds collided in ways that would test the very meaning of love, loyalty, and sacrifice. Stay with me until the end of this incredible story, and comment below what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale of unexpected love travels across the globe. The rain hammered the cracked asphalt of Detroit's east side like bullets from heaven, each drop exploding against the pavement in a symphony of urban desperation. At 11:47 p.m., the streets belonged to the forgotten, the shift workers heading home, the addicts seeking their next fix, and the predators who hunted in the shadows between flickering streetlights. Jack Morrison pulled his sanitation truck to the curb, the diesel engine coughing like an old man's dying breath. At 34, he looked older, lines etched deep around his eyes from years of double shifts and sleepless nights, his broad shoulders permanently hunched from the weight of responsibility that never seemed to lift. The fluorescent vest clung to his muscled frame, soaked through from hours of wrestling garbage bins in the relentless downpour. "Another beautiful night in paradise," he muttered, wiping rainwater from his face as he stepped into the storm. The alley behind Murphy's Diner was a graveyard of broken dreams, overflowing dumpsters, shattered glass, glinting like scattered stars, and the ever-present stench of decay that seemed to seep into your bones if you breathed it long enough. Jack had been working this route for 3 years, ever since the factory closed, and took his decent-paying job with it. Pride was a luxury he couldn't afford when Lily needed food on the table and a roof over her head. He was hauling a particularly heavy bag when he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. A whimper, soft and broken like a wounded animal, trying not to draw attention from predators. Jack froze his grip, tightening on the garbage bag. In this neighborhood, you learned to mind your own business. Curiosity was dangerous, and heroics were for people who didn't have a 6-year-old daughter waiting at home. But the sound came again, and this time Jack could tell it wasn't an animal. It was human, female, terrified. Against every instinct screaming at him to walk away, Jack set down the bag and moved deeper into the shadows. His work boots splashed through puddles that reflected the neon glow from the diner's flickering sign, casting everything in sickly shades of red and blue. That's when he saw her, huddled behind a rusted dumpster like a broken doll, knees drawn to her chest, long dark hair plastered to her skull by the rain. She couldn't have been more than 22, maybe 23, wearing what had once been an expensive white blouse now torn and stained with mud and something darker. Her jeans were ripped at the knees, and one shoe was missing entirely. But it was her eyes that stopped Jack's heart. They were the color of emeralds, wide with terror, and something else, a kind of hollow shock that came from having your world ripped apart in a single violent moment. She looked up at him like a cornered animal ready to run or fight, despite the fact that she was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "Hey," Jack said softly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "You okay?" The question was stupid. Clearly she was anything but okay, but it was all his stunned brain could manage. She stared at him for a long moment, taking in his uniform, the gentle concern in his weathered face. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, refined and cultured in a way that seemed completely out of place in this urban wasteland. They took everything," she said, the words coming out in broken pieces. "My purse, my phone, my everything." Jack felt his chest tighten. He'd seen enough victims of street crime to recognize the signs, the way she held herself, protective and fragile. the way her eyes darted to the mouth of the alley as if expecting her attackers to return. "How long ago?" he asked, kneeling down to her level, careful to keep his distance so he wouldn't spook her further. "I don't know, ours time kind of stopped." She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "I've been hiding here, afraid to move, afraid they'd come back." The rain continued its merciless assault, and Jack could see she was on the edge of hypothermia. Her lips had a bluish tinge and the shaking was getting worse. He should call the police. That was the smart thing, the safe thing. But Jack knew how long it would take for cops to respond to a call in this neighborhood, especially on a night like this. By the time they arrived, this girl might be dead from exposure if she was lucky enough not to encounter someone with worse intentions than robbery. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, and for a moment Jack thought she wouldn't answer. When she did, it was with the same whispered fragility. "Emma." "Emma, I'm Jack. Listen to me, you can't stay here. This isn't a safe place, especially not at night, especially not alone." "I don't have anywhere to go," she said, and the despair in her voice was so raw, it made Jack's chest ache. "No money, no ID, no way to call anyone." The decent thing would be to give her some cash for a motel room, maybe drive her to the nearest police station. The smart thing would be to walk away entirely. He had his own problems, his own responsibilities. Lily was asleep at Mrs. Chen's apartment downstairs, and he needed to pick her up before his neighbor's patience wore thin. But looking at Emma's face, at the way she'd curled into herself like she was trying to disappear, Jack made a decision that would change everything. "Come on," he said, standing and extending his hand. "You can't stay here." Emma looked at his outstretched palm like it might be a trap. "Where?" "My place. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. You can clean up, get some rest, figure out your next move in the morning." The offer hung between them in the rain-soaked air. Jack knew how it sounded, a strange man in a city where women disappeared offering shelter to someone vulnerable and alone. He wouldn't blame her if she ran. Instead, Emma studied his face with those remarkable green eyes searching for something. Whatever she found there must have reassured her, because after what felt like an eternity, she reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were ice-cold and delicate, like touching winter itself. Jack helped her to her feet, noting how she favored her left leg and the way she winced when she put weight on her bare foot. "Thank you," she whispered, and those two simple words carried the weight of desperate gratitude. Jack shrugged out of his work jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It swallowed her small frame, but it was dry and would provide some protection from the elements. "Thank me when we get you somewhere safe," he said, leading her toward his truck. The drive to Jack's apartment building took 12 minutes through streets that seemed abandoned by God and hope in equal measure. Emma sat pressed against the passenger door, clutching his jacket around herself like armor, her eyes fixed on the windshield wiper's hypnotic rhythm. Jack found himself stealing glances at her profile, trying to piece together her story. Everything about her seemed wrong for this part of town. The way she held herself, despite the trauma, the expensive dental work visible when she spoke, even the way her hair fell in natural waves that spoke of professional styling. "You're not from around here," he said, more statement than question. Emma tensed. "What makes you say that? Everything." Jack navigated around a pothole that could have swallowed a small car. "The way you talk, the way you carry yourself. Even beaten up and terrified, you've got this elegance that doesn't come from growing up in places like this." She was quiet for so long that Jack thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "People aren't always what they seem." "No," Jack agreed. "They're not." The Lincoln Gardens apartment complex was a monument to urban decay, 8 stories of faded brick and broken promises, where the elevator had been out of order for 2 years, and the security system was just a joke the landlord told at parties. Jack parked in his usual spot and cut the engine. "Home sweet home," he said, with a self-deprecating smile. "I know it's not much." "It's perfect," Emma interrupted, and the sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. "It's shelter. That's more than I had an hour ago." They climbed 3 flights of stairs, Emma's bare foot leaving small wet prints on the stained concrete. Jack's apartment was at the end of the hallway, 3C, with a door that had been painted so many times you couldn't see the wood grain anymore. "Listen," Jack said, key hovering at the lock. "I need to be straight with you about something." Emma's body went rigid. "What?" "I have a daughter, Lily. She's 6 and she's sleeping at my neighbor's place downstairs. I need to get her before Mrs. Chen starts charging me overtime." Jack met Emma's eyes. "I'm not telling you this to scare you or make you uncomfortable. I just want you to know what you're walking into." For a moment, Emma's carefully constructed walls cracked, and Jack saw something unexpected in her expression, longing mixed with a sadness so profound it made his heart clench. "A daughter," she said softly. "That must be wonderful." "It is. It's also terrifying every single day." Jack turned the key and pushed open the door. "But that's parenthood for you." The apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms, a combined living room and kitchen, and a bathroom with a shower that had a mind of its own. But it was clean, and the walls were covered with Lily's artwork, creating splashes of color against the beige paint. Children's books were stacked on every available surface, and a purple unicorn backpack sat by the door like a faithful guardian. Emma stepped inside, and Jack watched as she took in the details, the second-hand furniture arranged with care, the photographs of him and Lily at various ages covering the refrigerator, the small dining table where they shared meals and homework time. "It's beautiful," she said, and Jack could hear the surprise in her voice. "You don't have to lie to make me feel better," he said, hanging his keys on a hook by the door. "I know what it is." "It's a home," Emma said firmly. "There's a difference between a house and a home. This is a home." Jack felt something warm unfurl in his chest at her words. He'd worked so hard to create a stable environment for Lily, to give her everything she needed despite their limited resources. To have a stranger recognize that effort meant more than he could express. "The bathroom's down the hall," he said, suddenly conscious of his wet uniform and the way he probably smelled after 8 hours of garbage duty. "There are towels in the closet, and I think I've got some clothes that might fit you. Take a hot shower, warm up. I'll go get Lily, and we can figure out the sleeping arrangements." Emma nodded, still clutching his jacket around herself. "Jack." He paused at the door. "Yeah. Why are you helping me? You don't know anything about me. I could be dangerous." Jack looked at her, this fragile, frightened girl who'd been victimized and left for dead in an alley, asking him why he'd shown her basic human kindness. "Because someone needed help, and I was there to give it," he said simply. "That's what decent people do." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she turned away quickly to hide them. I'll pay you back, somehow. When I figure out how to contact when I get back on my feet. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out together." Jack left her standing in his living room, surrounded by the detritus of his and Lily's simple life, and went downstairs to collect his daughter. But as he knocked on Mrs. Chen's door, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just invited something into his world that would change everything. Mrs. Chen answered on the third knock, her gray hair in curlers, and her expression mixing relief with mild annoyance. "Jack, finally! Lily's been asking for you every 10 minutes. Sorry, Mrs. Chen. Work ran late." Jack could see Lily crashed out on the elderly woman's couch, clutching her stuffed elephant. How was she? Angel, as always. But she had another nightmare about her mother. Jack's jaw tightened. Even 3 years after Sarah's death, the grief still ambushed Lily at unexpected moments, usually manifesting in dreams, where her mother was lost and couldn't find her way home. "I'll talk to her," he said gently, lifting his daughter into his arms. Lily stirred but didn't wake, her small arms automatically wrapping around his neck. "Jack," Mrs. Chen said quietly, as he turned to leave. "Is everything okay? You look different tonight." Jack paused. Mrs. Chen was 78 years old and had lived in these apartments longer than anyone. She'd survived the neighborhood's transformation from working-class haven to urban war zone, and she had an uncanny ability to sense when something was off. "Just tired," he said, which wasn't entirely a lie. Mrs. Chen studied his face for a moment longer, then nodded. "Be careful, Jack. Men like you, good men with big hearts, sometimes they try to save everyone. But you can't save everyone, and trying to will break you." Her words followed him up the stairs, like a prophecy he wasn't sure he wanted to hear. Jack's apartment was quiet when he returned, but he could hear the shower running. He laid Lily down in her bed, tucking her elephant under one arm and pulling her favorite blanket up to her chin. She stirred slightly, her eyes fluttering open. "Daddy, hey baby girl, I'm home." Lily rubbed her eyes with tiny fists. "I had the dream again. About Mommy." Jack's heart clenched. He sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her dark hair away from her face. "Tell me about it." "She was lost in a big dark place and she kept calling my name, but I couldn't find her." Lily's voice was small and scared. "I wanted to help her, but I didn't know how." "Dreams can be scary sometimes," Jack said gently. "But they're not real. Mommy isn't lost, sweetheart. She's in heaven, remember, and she's watching over us." "But what if she can't see us from up there? What if she forgets about us?" The question hit Jack like a physical blow. How do you explain the permanence of death to a 6-year-old who still believed in Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy? How do you convince a child that love transcends mortality when you sometimes doubted it yourself? "Mommy could never forget about us," he said, hoping his voice sounded more certain than he felt. "Love doesn't disappear just because someone goes to heaven. It stays with us forever right here." He tapped Lily's chest over her heart. Lily considered this with the serious expression she wore when processing big concepts. "Like how I still love Mr. Whiskers even though he's buried in the backyard." Mr. Whiskers had been Lily's goldfish who died the previous summer and received a funeral elaborate enough for a dignitary. Jack had to bite back a smile at the comparison. "Exactly like that." Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "Daddy, there's a lady in our bathroom." Jack's smile faded. "You saw her. I heard the shower when you carried me in. Is she staying over? Like when Uncle Mike visits?" Uncle Mike was Jack's younger brother, a traveling salesman who crashed on their couch a few times a year between jobs and relationships. But Emma's presence was nothing like Mike's casual visits, and Jack struggled with how to explain the situation. "Her name is Emma, and she needed help tonight. She'll probably just stay for a little while until she can figure out where she needs to go." "Is she sad?" The question caught Jack off guard. "Why do you ask that?" Lily shrugged with the matter-of-fact wisdom that children sometimes possessed. Sad people need extra kindness. That's what you always tell me. Yes, baby girl. I think she is sad. So we'll be extra kind to her, okay? Okay, Daddy. Lily's eyes were already drifting shut again. I love you. I love you too, kiddo. Sweet dreams. Jack kissed her forehead and quietly left her room, pulling the door mostly closed behind him. The shower had stopped, and he could hear movement in the bathroom, the soft sounds of someone trying to be quiet in an unfamiliar space. He went to his bedroom and dug through his dresser, looking for something that might fit Emma. His clothes would all be too big, but he found an old sweatshirt from his college days that had shrunk in the wash and a pair of sweatpants with a drawstring waist. When he knocked on the bathroom door, Emma's voice came through, muffled and uncertain. Yes, I've got some clean clothes for you, Jack said. I'll leave them right outside the door. Thank you. Jack set the clothes on the floor and retreated to the kitchen, where he started a pot of coffee and tried to process what he'd gotten himself into. Everything about this situation violated his usual cautious approach to life. He didn't bring strangers home, especially not to the sanctuary he'd built for Lily. He didn't get involved in other people's problems because he had enough of his own. But something about Emma had bypassed all his rational defenses. Maybe it was the way she'd looked so utterly broken in that alley, or the careful way she'd spoken about his home being beautiful. Maybe it was the glimpse of profound sadness he'd seen when he mentioned Lily. Or maybe it was something else entirely, something he wasn't ready to examine too closely. The bathroom door opened, and Emma emerged wearing his clothes, which hung loose on her small frame but were clean and dry. She'd towel-dried her hair, and without the rain and grime, Jack could see that she was even more beautiful than he'd first realized. But it was a delicate kind of beauty, like fine china that had been cracked and carefully glued back together. Feel better? He asked, pouring 2 cups of coffee. Much. Thank you. Emma accepted the steaming mug, gratefully wrapping her hands around it, as if drawing warmth from the ceramic. I found some antibiotic cream in your medicine cabinet and cleaned up the cuts on my feet. I hope that's okay. Of course, how bad are they? They'll heal. Emma took a sip of coffee and Jack saw her shoulders relax slightly. This is good. It's just instant. It's perfect. She looked around the kitchen, taking in the drawings Lily had made that were held to the refrigerator with colorful magnets. Your daughter is an artist. Jack followed her gaze to a particularly ambitious drawing of what might have been a unicorn, or possibly a very lumpy horse. She's got imagination, I'll give her that. What's her name? Lily. She's 6, and she's... Jack paused, searching for the right words. She's everything. Emma's expression grew wistful. She's lucky to have a father who loves her so much. I'm the lucky one, Jack said automatically, but then he caught something in Emma's tone. Do you have family, someone I should call to let them know you're safe? Emma's grip tightened on her coffee mug. It's complicated. Most families are. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee as if it held answers to questions she wasn't ready to ask. When she looked up, Jack saw a flicker of pain so deep it made his chest ache. My father and I, we don't exactly see eye to eye on things. And my mother died when I was 12. I'm sorry, Jack said, and meant it. That's tough. Cancer, Emma said quietly. She fought for 2 years, but in the end, she shrugged, but Jack could see the gesture cost her. After that, my father threw himself into work, even more than before. I think I reminded him too much of her. Jack felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the recognition of shared loss. Lily's mother died 3 years ago. Car accident. Sometimes I catch Lily staring at nothing, and I know she's trying to remember what Sarah's voice sounded like. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry. That must be incredibly difficult for both of you. We manage. We have each other, and that's enough most days. Jack studied Emma's face, noting the way she held herself when talking about her family, like someone trying to protect a wound from being touched. But you didn't answer my question. Is there someone who should know you're okay? Emma set down her coffee mug with hands that trembled slightly. There are people who will be looking for me, yes, but not because they care about my well-being. What does that mean? It means... Emma took a shaky breath. It means I can't stay here long. I don't want to bring trouble to your door. What kind of trouble? Emma looked at him for a long moment, and Jack could see her wrestling with how much to reveal. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. The kind that comes when you run away from a life that was planned for you before you were born. The kind that follows you when you refuse to be what everyone expects you to be. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain still pattering against the windows. Emma, what exactly are you running from? Before she could answer, a sound from the hallway made them both freeze, soft footsteps padding toward the kitchen. Lily appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes and clutching her stuffed elephant. Daddy, I heard voices and thought maybe Mommy came back. Jack's heart broke a little at his daughter's sleepy confession. Even 3 years later, she still sometimes hoped that death was just a really long trip, and that one day Sarah would walk through their door. No, baby girl. This is Emma, the lady I told you about. Lily's attention shifted to Emma, and Jack watched as his daughter took in every detail with the intense curiosity of a child encountering something new and interesting. Hello, Emma, Lily said with the formal politeness he'd taught her. Are you staying for breakfast? Emma looked stricken, as if the simple question had somehow wounded her. I don't know. You should, Lily said matter-of-factly. Daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole world, don't you? Daddy, I make adequate pancakes, Jack corrected, but he was watching Emma's face as she stared at his daughter. There was such longing in her expression, mixed with something that looked almost like grief. Can I touch your hair? Lily asked Emma with the directness that only children possessed. It's so pretty and long. Mine's too short, and it never stays where I want it to. Emma glanced at Jack, who nodded encouragingly. Of course you can. Lily approached cautiously, the way she might a new animal at the zoo, and gently ran her small fingers through Emma's dark hair. It's so soft, she marveled. Like silk. Are you a princess? Emma's laugh was shaky, and Jack saw tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. No, sweetheart. I'm definitely not a princess. But you look like one, Lily insisted. Especially now that you're not all wet and muddy. Daddy doesn't. She looked like a princess. Jack found himself really looking at Emma for the first time since bringing her home. With her hair clean and his oversized clothes hanging on her delicate frame, she did look almost ethereal, like something from a fairy tale that had wandered into his very ordinary life. She does, he agreed, and Emma blushed. See? Lily beamed. I told you. Are you going to live here now? Lily, Jack said gently. Emma is just staying for tonight. She has her own life to get back to. But Lily had already decided that Emma belonged in their small family unit, at least temporarily. That's okay. One night is better than no nights. Can you read to me before bed? Daddy's good at voices, but you might know different stories. Emma looked overwhelmed by the simple request. Yes. I'd like that very much. Yay, come on, I'll show you my room and all my books. Lily grabbed Emma's hand, with the complete trust that children gave so freely, and started tugging her toward the hallway. Jack watched them go, his daughter chattering excitedly about her collection of picture books and the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling, while Emma listened with an attention that seemed almost desperate in its intensity. Something was happening here, something that went beyond simple charity or temporary shelter. Jack could feel it in the way Emma's entire demeanor softened around Lily, in the way his daughter had immediately claimed this stranger as someone worthy of her affection. But he could also sense the shadows that clung to Emma, the secrets she was carrying, the trouble she'd mentioned bringing to his door. Whatever she was running from, it was serious enough to leave her hiding in an alley, choosing hypothermia over going home. As he stood alone in his kitchen listening to Lily's excited voice explaining the plot of her favorite bedtime story, Jack realized that Mrs. Chen had been right. He was trying to save someone again, just like he'd tried to save Sarah from the cancer that had ultimately claimed her, just like he tried to save Lily from every hurt the world might inflict. The difference was that Emma wasn't his to save. She was a stranger who would be gone by morning, returning to whatever life she'd run from, leaving him and Lily with nothing but questions and the memory of one rainy night when their world had briefly expanded to include someone beautiful and broken and mysterious. But as Jack finished his coffee and prepared to settle in for what would undoubtedly be a sleepless night, he couldn't shake the feeling that morning was still very far away, and that before Emma left their lives, she was going to turn his carefully ordered world completely upside down. In Lily's room, he could hear Emma's voice, cultured and gentle, reading The Velveteen Rabbit, with an emotion that suggested the story meant something personal to her. Jack found himself drawn down the hallway, stopping just outside his daughter's room to listen. "What is real?" asked the rabbit one day. Emma read her voice, catching slightly on the words. "Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle?" Jack leaned against the doorframe and watched as Emma sat on the edge of Lily's bed, the book open in her lap, his daughter's rapt attention focused entirely on the story. The scene was so domestic, so natural, that it made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. "Real isn't how you are made," Emma continued, and Jack heard the tremor in her voice. "It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real." Lily was hanging on every word, but Jack found himself watching Emma's face, seeing something there that spoke of wounds he couldn't begin to understand. This wasn't just a bedtime story to her. It was something deeper, more personal. "Does it hurt?" asked the rabbit. "Sometimes," said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. "When you are real, you don't mind being hurt." Emma's voice broke slightly on the last words, and she had to pause to collect herself. Lily, with the intuitive kindness of a child who had experienced loss, reached out and patted Emma's hand. "It's okay," Lily said softly. "Sad stories are still good stories. Daddy says that's how you know they're true." Emma looked at Jack's daughter with such profound gratitude that it made his heart ache. "Your daddy is a very wise man." "He is," Lily agreed seriously. "He takes care of me and makes me feel safe and teaches me things. And now he's taking care of you too." "Yes," Emma whispered, her eyes finding Jack in the doorway. "He is." The moment stretched between them, heavy with implications and possibilities that Jack knew he couldn't afford to explore. Whatever was happening here, whatever connection was forming, it was temporary. Emma had made that clear. But as he watched her finish the story, as he saw the way she tucked Lily in with the same gentle care he used every night, Jack realized that some moments were too perfect to last, and that perhaps that's what made them so precious. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the city. But inside apartment 3C, three people who had been strangers just hours before settled into an unexpected peace that felt like the calm before everything changed forever. The first light of dawn crept through the thin curtains of Jack's bedroom, where he lay on the couch, staring at shadows that danced across the ceiling, like ghosts of decisions he wasn't sure he should have made. Every sound from the street below, a car door slamming footsteps on wet pavement. The distant wail of a siren made his muscles tense with the possibility that Emma's past had finally caught up with her. He'd given Emma his bed despite her protests, and spent the night listening to the building settle around them, hyper-aware of every creak and groan. Somewhere around 3 a.m., he'd heard soft crying from his bedroom, muffled but unmistakable, and it had taken every ounce of restraint not to go check on her. Whatever demons Emma was wrestling with, they were hers to face. The coffee maker's automatic timer clicked on at 6:30, filling the apartment with the rich aroma that usually signaled the start of another ordinary day. But nothing about this morning felt ordinary. Jack had a stranger sleeping in his bed. His daughter would wake up expecting to see the princess from the night before, and he had absolutely no idea how to navigate the complicated emotions that Emma's presence had stirred up. "Daddy?" Lily's voice drifted from her room, sleepy and confused. "Is the pretty lady still here?" Jack sat up, running his hands through his hair. "Yeah, baby girl. She's still here." "Good." The simple satisfaction in Lily's voice made Jack smile despite his exhaustion. His daughter had claimed Emma as if she belonged to them, the way children sometimes adopted stray cats or injured birds. By the time Jack had showered and dressed for his day shift, he'd managed to trade with Rodriguez so he could be home during normal hours. The apartment was stirring to life. Emma emerged from his bedroom wearing the same oversized clothes from the night before, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that somehow managed to look elegant. "I hope I didn't keep you awake," she said quietly, not quite meeting his eyes. "You didn't," Jack lied smoothly. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks." Emma's honesty seemed to surprise even her. "Your bed is incredibly comfortable. It's just a mattress from a discount store." "It's not the mattress." Emma's voice was soft, thoughtful. "It's the feeling of being safe. I'd forgotten what that was like." Before Jack could respond to that loaded statement, Lily burst into the kitchen like a small tornado, her dark hair sticking up at odd angles, and her pajamas twisted from sleep. "Emma, you're still here." She launched herself at Emma with the wholehearted enthusiasm that only children possessed, wrapping her arms around Emma's waist in a fierce hug. Emma froze for a moment, as if she'd forgotten how to receive affection, then slowly brought her arms around Lily, holding her with a gentleness that made Jack's chest tight. "Good morning, sweetheart," Emma murmured into Lily's hair. "Are you going to have breakfast with us? Please say yes. Daddy's making pancakes and they're the best in the whole wide world." Jack caught Emma's eye over Lily's head, seeing the conflict there, the desire to stay warring with whatever instinct told her she needed to leave. "I don't want to impose," Emma said carefully. "You're not imposing," Jack said, surprised by the firmness in his own voice. "Besides, I already started the batter. Can't let it go to waste." Emma's smile was small but genuine. "In that case, I'd love to stay for breakfast." The next hour unfolded with a domesticity that felt both natural and surreal. Emma helped Lily set the table, while Jack worked at the stove, and they moved around each other in the small kitchen, with an ease that suggested they'd been doing this for years instead of hours. "Emma, do you know how to make pancakes?" Lily asked, carefully, placing forks beside each plate. "I've never actually made them from scratch," Emma admitted. "Where I come from, we usually had other people who did the cooking." "Like servants?" Lily's eyes went wide with the kind of fascination children had for anything outside their normal experience. Emma's expression grew guarded. Something like that. Jack flipped a pancake with more force than necessary, filing away another piece of the puzzle that was Emma's background. Servants meant money, real money, which only deepened the mystery of how she'd ended up beaten and robbed in an alley. "Well, Daddy can teach you," Lily announced, with the certainty of someone who believed all problems had simple solutions. "He taught me how to crack eggs without getting shells in the bowl. It only took me like 50 tries." "It was 6 tries," Jack corrected, sliding a perfectly golden pancake onto the growing stack. 56, same thing," Lily said with a dismissive wave that made Emma laugh, the first genuine laugh Jack had heard from her. They sat around the small table sharing pancakes and coffee, while Lily provided running commentary on everything from the weather to her upcoming school field trip to the zoo. Emma listened with an attention that seemed almost hungry, as if she was trying to memorize every detail of this ordinary family breakfast. "Emma, do you have a job?" Lily asked, with the blunt curiosity that made adults squirm. "Lily," Jack warned gently. "It's okay," Emma said, though Jack could see the question had hit a nerve. It's complicated. I haven't really had to work before." "Oh, so you're rich." Lily's matter-of-fact assessment made Emma choke on her coffee. "Lily." "What? It's not a bad thing to be rich. Mrs. Patterson in 4B says rich people are just people with more money. And Emma seems really nice, so being rich and nice is probably even better." Emma's laugh was shaky. "Your daughter has a very unique perspective on the world." "She gets that from her mother," Jack said. Then immediately regretted bringing up Sarah. But Emma didn't seem uncomfortable with the mention of his late wife. "Tell me about her," Emma said softly. "Your wife. What was she like?" Jack felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with talking about Sarah, but there was something in Emma's expression, a genuine interest free from pity or discomfort, that made the words come easier than usual. "She was fierce," he said, surprising himself. 5 feet 2 inches of pure determination. She used to say that life was too short to settle for anything less than extraordinary, even if extraordinary just meant making sure Lily knew she was loved every single day. "She sounds wonderful." "She was, and she would have liked you." The words slipped out before Jack could stop them, and he saw Emma's eyes widen slightly. "How can you possibly know that?" "Because she believed in taking care of people who needed taking care of. She used to bring home strays, not just animals, but people. Co-workers going through divorces, neighbors dealing with sick parents, anyone who looked like they could use a friend." Jack smiled at the memory. "She always said that kindness was the only currency that mattered." Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her plate. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes. "I think I would have liked her too." After breakfast, Emma insisted on doing the dishes despite Jack's protests. She stood at the sink carefully washing each plate and cup while Lily provided help by drying and putting things away in creative but wrong locations. "Emma, can you braid hair?" Lily asked, holding up a handful of uneven pigtails that Jack had attempted that morning. "I think so. It's been a while, but—" Emma dried her hands and knelt down to Lily's level. "Let's see what we can do." Jack watched from the doorway as Emma's fingers worked through his daughter's hair with a skill that spoke of practice. The concentration on her face, the gentle way she handled Lily's tangles, the soft humming that escaped her lips as she worked it all painted a picture of someone who had once cared for children, or at least had been around them. "There," Emma said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "What do you think?" Lily ran to the bathroom mirror and gasped with delight. Emma had transformed her messy hair into an intricate French braid that would have looked at home on a magazine cover. "I look like a real princess," Lily exclaimed, spinning in circles to watch the braid swing behind her. "You've always looked like a real princess," Jack said, but his eyes were on Emma, who was watching Lily with such wistfulness that it made his heart ache. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked quietly. Emma's expression shuddered. "I had a lot of practice when I was younger. Siblings, something like that." Emma moved away from the subject with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years deflecting personal questions. "I should probably think about making some calls, figuring out my next steps." The words hit Jack like cold water. Of course she would leave, he'd known that from the beginning. But somehow watching her with Lily, seeing how naturally she'd fit into their morning routine, he'd let himself forget that this was temporary. "You can use my phone," he offered, though part of him wanted to hide it, to keep her trapped in this small bubble of normalcy they'd created. Emma nodded, but she didn't move toward the phone. Instead, she stood in the middle of his living room, looking lost, as if she'd offered to do something she wasn't sure she actually wanted to do. "Emma," Jack said carefully, "where exactly are you planning to go?" She was quiet for so long that he thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know." The admission hung between them, loaded with implications that Jack wasn't sure he was ready to explore. Emma wasn't just a victim of random street crime, she was someone running from a life she couldn't or wouldn't return to, with nowhere else to go. "What happened to you?" Jack asked gently. "Really happened, not just the mugging." Emma sank onto his couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment Jack thought she was going to deflect again, to give him another non-answer wrapped in careful words. Instead, she looked up at him with eyes that held years of carefully buried pain. "I've been running for 3 days," she said quietly. "From a life that was never really mine, from expectations I could never live up to, from people who see me as a commodity rather than a person." "What kind of expectations?" Emma's laugh was bitter. "The kind that come with being born into a family where your worth is measured in stock prices and strategic marriages, where love is conditional on compliance and rebellion is seen as betrayal." Jack felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place, the expensive dental work, the cultured accent, the way she'd known servants would do her cooking. "Your family has money," he said. "Not a question." "My family is money," Emma corrected. "Everything else is just window dressing." "So you left?" "I ran. There's a difference." Emma's voice was filled with self-recrimination. "Running implies you have somewhere to go. I just couldn't stay anymore." Jack wanted to ask more questions about her family, about what had finally driven her to leave, about the life she'd abandoned. But Lily chose that moment to come bouncing back into the living room, her newly braided hair still making her glow with pride. "Emma, will you teach me how to braid? I want to do it for my friend Madison at school." Emma's expression softened immediately. "Of course, sweetheart. We'll start with something simple." The next hour passed in a haze of domestic tranquility that felt both precious and fragile. Emma taught Lily basic braiding techniques using yarn from Jack's emergency sewing kit while he prepared for his shift, and tried not to think about how natural this all felt. His phone rang at 10:30, Rodriguez's voice crackling through the speaker with barely controlled panic. "Morrison, we got a problem. Jenkins called in sick, Martinez is dealing with that family emergency, and the city's breathing down our necks about the pickup schedule. I need you to come in early." Jack closed his eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle back on his shoulders. "How early?" Now if you can manage it. I know it's your day off, but I'll be there in 20 minutes. Jack hung up and found Emma and Lily on the couch, heads bent together over a particularly tricky braid pattern. The domestic scene made his chest tight with emotions he didn't have time to examine. I have to go to work, he announced, hating the way Emma's face immediately went guarded. Of course, she said, already starting to stand. I should stay, Jack said quickly. Please, at least until I get back. We can figure things out then. Emma hesitated, clearly torn between the desire to stay in this safe space and whatever instincts told her to keep moving. Daddy has to work a lot, Lily said matter-of-factly, apparently oblivious to the tension between the adults. But he always comes home. Can Emma stay with me until you get back? Jack saw the moment Emma's resolve crumbled. If that's okay with your father. More than okay, Jack said, surprising himself with the intensity of his relief. There's food in the fridge, spare keys on the hook by the door, if you need to go out. Make yourselves at home. Jack, Emma said softly, as he gathered his work gear. Thank you for everything. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. Don't worry about repaying me, Jack said, pausing at the door. Just be safe. Both of you. As he left for work, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a mistake, either in trusting a stranger with his daughter, or in leaving when every instinct told him that Emma needed protection from whatever shadows were chasing her. But Lily was chattering excitedly about the braiding lessons, and Emma was listening with the kind of attention that suggested she was as starved for normal human connection as Lily was for maternal affection. Maybe Jack thought as he climbed into his truck, sometimes the biggest mistakes were also the most necessary ones. The sanitation department was chaos when Jack arrived. Drivers scrambling to cover routes, and supervisors barking orders that contradicted each other. Jack threw himself into the work, grateful for the physical demands that kept his mind occupied. But even as he wrestled garbage bins and navigated traffic, part of his attention remained fixed on the apartment where he'd left his daughter with a beautiful stranger who carried secrets like weapons. You're distracted today, Rodriguez observed during their lunch break, studying Jack's face with the shrewd attention of someone who'd known him for 3 years. Just tired. Bullshit. You've got that look you had when Lily was in the hospital with pneumonia, like you're carrying the weight of the world and trying not to let anyone see it. Jack took a bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly to buy time. Rodriguez was right, he did feel like he was carrying something heavy. Something that could either be a blessing or a disaster, depending on factors completely beyond his control. There's a situation at home, Jack said finally. What kind of situation? The kind where you help someone and hope it doesn't blow up in your face. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, then leaned back against the truck. You know, my grandmother used to say that angels sometimes come disguised as people who need help. The trick is figuring out whether you're helping an angel or inviting trouble into your house. And how exactly do you tell the difference? Time, Rodriguez said simply. Angels make your life better. Trouble makes it more complicated. Jack thought about Emma reading to Lily the night before, about the way she'd braided his daughter's hair, with such gentle skill about the sadness in her eyes that spoke of wounds too deep to heal quickly. Was she an angel or trouble? Maybe Jack realized she was both. The afternoons stretched endlessly, each garbage bin feeling heavier than the last, each street corner reminding him of the alley where he'd found Emma. By the time his shift ended at 4 p.m., Jack was practically vibrating with the need to get home to make sure Lily was safe, to see if Emma was still there, or if she'd vanished like a dream that couldn't survive daylight. He took the stairs to his apartment, 2 at a time, his key already in his hand, before he reached the 3rd floor. The sound that greeted him as he opened the door stopped him cold. Laughter. Pure, delighted laughter from both Emma and Lily, the kind of sound that spoke of genuine joy rather than polite amusement. Jack followed the voices to the kitchen, where he found a scene that looked like it belonged in a different life entirely. Emma and Lily were covered in flour, their faces streaked with what appeared to be cake batter, while something that might once have been cookies cooled on the counter. "Daddy?" Lily launched herself at him, leaving floury handprints on his work uniform. "Emma taught me how to make cookies. Well, we tried to make cookies. They look more like pancakes, but they taste really good." Jack looked over his daughter's head at Emma, who was attempting to brush flour out of her hair with limited success. "We had a small mishap with the measuring cups," Emma explained, her cheeks pink with embarrassment and exertion. "Apparently, there's a significant difference between a tablespoon and a cup when it comes to baking powder." "They exploded," Lily added with the glee that children found in domestic disasters. "Like little dough volcanoes. But Emma says mistakes are just practice for getting it right next time." Jack felt something shift in his chest as he took in the scene, his usually pristine kitchen transformed into a battlefield of culinary ambition, his daughter glowing with happiness, and Emma looking more relaxed and alive than she had since he'd found her in that alley. "How was your day?" Emma asked, and the simple question hit Jack with unexpected force. When was the last time someone had asked him that? When was the last time he'd come home to anything other than the quiet apartment and the weight of single parenthood? "Better now," he said honestly. "How was yours?" "Perfect," Emma said softly, then seemed surprised by her own answer. "We braided, we attempted baking, we read 3 different books about dragons, and Lily taught me how to play Go Fish." "Emma's really bad at Go Fish," Lily announced with brutal 6-year-old honesty. "But she's getting better, and she knows all the words to the songs in my Disney movies." "All of them?" Jack raised an eyebrow. Emma blushed. "I may have had a somewhat sheltered childhood that involved a lot of animated movies." "She knows the songs in languages I can't even say," Lily added. "Show him Emma." "Oh, I don't think—" "Please." Lily deployed the devastating combination of wide eyes and trembling lower lip that had been known to make Jack buy ice cream for breakfast. Emma looked helplessly at Jack, who found himself curious despite everything. "I'd like to hear it too." Emma closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering courage, then began to sing softly in what sounded like French. Her voice was clear and sweet, trained in a way that spoke of expensive lessons and careful cultivation. But there was also something raw in it, something that suggested music had once been a refuge rather than just an accomplishment. Lily listened in rapt attention, and Jack found himself transfixed by this glimpse into Emma's carefully guarded past. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet except for the soft tick of the clock on the wall. "That was beautiful," Jack said quietly. "Magnifique," Emma corrected with a small smile. "My mother was French. She insisted I learn the language along with piano and voice lessons and all the other things proper young ladies were supposed to know." "Was supposed to—" Jack caught the past tense. Emma's expression clouded. "She died when I was 12. After that, my father decided that practical skills were more important than artistic pursuits. The lessons stopped." "That's sad," Lily said, with the straightforward empathy that children possessed. "Music makes everything better. Even when I'm scared of thunderstorms, if Daddy sings to me, it's not as scary." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Your daddy is very wise." "He is," Lily agreed seriously. "That's why I knew he was right to bring you home. People who need help should get help, and people who can help should give help. It's like a circle." Jack stared at his daughter, amazed as always by the wisdom that sometimes emerged from her 6-year-old observations. "Where did you learn about circles like that?" "From you, Daddy. You always say that what goes around comes around, so if we put good things out, good things come back." Emma was looking at Lily with such intensity that Jack wondered what she was seeing, what memories or possibilities Lily's innocent wisdom was stirring up. "Your daughter is remarkable," Emma said softly. "She gets that from her mother, too," Jack said, then paused. "But maybe some of it's her own." They cleaned up the kitchen together, moving around each other with the same natural rhythm they'd found that morning. Emma proved to be surprisingly efficient, despite her admitted lack of domestic experience, and Lily provided running commentary on everything from the proper way to load a dishwasher to her plans for tomorrow's adventures. "Emma, you should come to my school for show and tell," Lily announced as they finished wiping down the counters. "I could tell everyone about the princess who knows all the Disney songs in French." "I'm not really a princess," Emma said gently. "But you could be," Lily insisted with the fierce certainty that made her such a force of nature. "Princesses aren't born, they're made. That's what Belle says in Beauty and the Beast. It's not about having a castle or a crown. It's about being brave and kind and helping people." Emma's breath caught, and Jack saw her hands tremble slightly as she folded the dish towel. "By that definition," Emma said quietly, "I think your father is more of a prince than I am a princess." "Daddy's definitely a prince," Lily agreed without hesitation. "But that doesn't mean you can't be a princess too. There can be lots of princesses in the same story." Jack watched Emma's face as she processed his daughter's words, seeing something there that looked like hope warring with fear. Whatever life Emma had left behind, whatever demons she was running from, Lily's innocent acceptance seemed to be chipping away at the walls Emma had built around herself. "Lily," Jack said gently, "why don't you go get ready for your bath? I need to talk to Emma about some grown-up things." Lily's face fell slightly, but she nodded with the resigned understanding of a child who knew when adult conversations were necessary. "Okay, but Emma, you'll still be here when I get out." Emma hesitated for just a moment before nodding. "I'll be here." Lily beamed and skipped off toward the bathroom, leaving Jack and Emma alone in the kitchen that still smelled faintly of their failed baking experiment. "We need to talk," Jack said softly. Emma's shoulders tensed. "I know. This can't go on indefinitely. Not because I don't want you here," Jack added quickly, seeing her expression, "but because whatever you're running from, it's going to catch up eventually. And when it does, I need to know that Lily won't be caught in the crossfire." Emma nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "You're right. I've been selfish staying here pretending that I could just disappear into your life. That's not what I meant." "No, you're absolutely right to be concerned." Emma's voice was steady, but Jack could see the effort it cost her. "I should go tonight before I put you and Lily in any more danger." "What kind of danger, Emma?" "You keep hinting at trouble at people looking for you, but you won't tell me what we're actually dealing with here." Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring out the kitchen window at the urban landscape beyond. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "My father is Winston Harrington." The name hit Jack like a physical blow. Even someone who didn't follow financial news knew that name. Harrington Industries was a multinational conglomerate with interests in everything from real estate to technology, and Winston Harrington was one of the wealthiest men in America. "Jesus," Jack breathed. "He's been grooming me since childhood to take over certain aspects of the family business, including an arranged marriage to the son of one of his business partners. A merger disguised as a love story." Emma's laugh was bitter. I was supposed to announce my engagement last week at a charity gala. Instead, I ran. Jack felt the room spinning slightly as he processed this information. Emma wasn't just rich, she was Harrington rich, billionaire rich, the kind of wealthy that operated by different rules entirely. And now he's looking for you. He's had private investigators, security firms, probably half the police force in 3 states looking for me. Emma turned to face him, and Jack saw the fear she'd been hiding behind careful composure. I don't know how I managed to stay hidden for 3 days, but it won't last much longer. Men like my father don't accept losing, especially not when what they've lost is worth billions in potential business deals. Jack sank into one of his kitchen chairs, trying to wrap his head around the magnitude of what Emma had just revealed. He'd brought home the runaway daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country. He'd let her spend time with Lily, had started to care about her, had allowed himself to imagine. "You have to go back," he said quietly. "I know." "No, I mean you have to go back now, tonight. Before they figure out you're here, before they connect you to me and Lily." Emma nodded, but tears were streaming down her face. "I know," she whispered. "I've known since this morning that I was living on borrowed time. But Jack, these past 2 days with you and Lily, they've been the happiest of my life." The confession hung between them like a bridge neither of them knew how to cross. Jack looked at Emma, really looked at her, seeing past the expensive bone structure and cultured accent to the frightened young woman who'd found temporary refuge in his small, ordinary life. "Emma, I love her," Emma said suddenly, the words tumbling out as if she couldn't hold them back any longer. "I know I have no right to. I know I've only known her for a day, but I love Lily like she was my own. And you, God, Jack, what you've built here, the life you've created for her, it's everything I never knew I wanted." Jack felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling. "Emma, don't. I know it's impossible. I know I'm from a different world. I know I bring nothing but trouble. But I needed you to know before I disappear forever that what you showed me, kindness without expectation, love without conditions, it changed something in me." Before Jack could respond, Lily's voice echoed from the bathroom. "Daddy, I'm ready for my story." The spell broke reality, crashing back with the force of a freight train. Emma wiped her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself, but Jack could see the cracks in her facade. "I should say goodbye to her," Emma said quietly. "And then I'll go." Jack wanted to argue, wanted to find some way to make this work, to protect both Emma and Lily from the collision of worlds that seemed inevitable. But logic and responsibility won out over the dangerous emotions that Emma's presence had stirred up. "One more night," he heard himself saying. "Stay one more night. Leave in the morning when you can think clearly, when you can plan where you're going." Emma looked at him with such gratitude that it made his chest ache. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that sending you out into the night with nowhere to go isn't the right answer. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Emma nodded, fresh tears threatening. "Thank you. For everything." As they walked toward Lily's room for the nightly bedtime routine, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was making a mistake that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But looking at Emma's face as she prepared to read to his daughter one last time, he knew that some mistakes were worth making, even if they broke your heart in the process. In 12 hours, Emma would be gone, and his life would return to its careful, safe routine. But for now, for this one last night, Jack allowed himself to pretend that miracles were possible, that love could conquer the vast distances between different worlds, and that sometimes the people who needed saving could save you right back. The morning light filtered through Lily's bedroom curtains with the cruel indifference of time that refused to slow down for human heartbreak. Emma sat on the edge of the small bed watching Jack's daughter sleep, with the desperate intensity of someone trying to memorize a face she might never see again. Lily's dark hair fanned across her pillow, one small hand clutching her stuffed elephant, while the other reached toward the empty space where Emma had been sitting just moments before. It was 5:47 a.m., and Emma had been awake since 3:30, lying in Jack's bed and staring at the ceiling, while her mind raced through possibilities that all led to the same inevitable conclusion. She had to leave. Not just this apartment, not just this neighborhood, but this entire fantasy of belonging somewhere, of being part of something real and good and uncomplicated. She'd tried to slip out while they were both still sleeping, had even made it as far as the front door, with her hand on the knob. But something had pulled her back, maybe the sound of Lily's soft breathing, maybe the coffee mug Jack had left in the sink with "World's Best Dad" printed in faded letters, maybe just the cowardly realization that she couldn't disappear without saying goodbye. "You're leaving." Emma startled at the quiet voice behind her. Jack stood in the doorway, fully dressed. Despite the early hour, his expression resigned, but not surprised. "You knew I was going to," Emma whispered, not wanting to wake Lily. "I hoped you might change your mind." Jack's voice was carefully neutral, but Emma could see the disappointment he was trying to hide. "I hoped you might trust us enough to let us help you figure this out." Emma's throat tightened. "Jack, you don't understand what you're up against. My father doesn't negotiate, he doesn't compromise, and he doesn't lose. If he finds out I've been here, if he connects you to me in any way." What exactly do you think he'll do?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, and Emma realized that for all her fears, she'd never actually articulated the specific dangers that Winston Harrington represented. How could she explain a lifetime of emotional manipulation disguised as paternal concern? How could she make Jack understand that her father's love was conditional on control, and that love withheld could be more devastating than outright cruelty? "He'll destroy everything you've built," Emma said finally. "Your job, your reputation, your ability to provide for Lily. He has connections everywhere, city government, social services, law enforcement. He could make your life a living hell without ever leaving his office." Jack was quiet for a moment, processing this. When he spoke, his voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. "Let me ask you something, Emma. What kind of life are you going back to?" "I'm not going back. I'm going away. Somewhere far enough that he can't find me, somewhere I can start over." "With what money? What identification? What skills?" Jack's questions weren't cruel, but they were brutally practical. "You told me yourself you've never really worked, never lived on your own. How long do you think you can survive out there?" Emma felt tears threatening because he was voicing the same fears that had kept her awake all night. She had no plan beyond running, no resources beyond the small amount of cash she'd managed to hide in her shoe, no experience with the kind of life that awaited someone with no identity and no safety net. "I'll figure it out," she said, but even she could hear how hollow the words sounded. "Or," Jack said quietly, "you could stay. Let us help you figure out a way to fight back. Fight back against Winston Harrington." Emma's laugh was bitter. "Jack, you have no idea what you're suggesting. My father isn't just rich. He's powerful in ways that most people can't even comprehend. He owns judges. He buys politicians. He destroys anyone who gets in his way. Maybe, but he's not God, Emma. He's just a man with money, and money doesn't solve every problem." Before Emma could respond, Lily stirred in her bed, making the soft, murmuring sounds that preceded waking up. Emma's heart clenched as she watched the little girl's eyes flutter open, immediately seeking out her face with the trust that children gave so freely. "Emma," Lily's voice was sleepy and confused. Why are you awake so early? Emma forced a smile, leaning down to brush a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. I couldn't sleep, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups have trouble with that. Is it because you're worried about something? Lily sat up, instantly alert with the intuitive understanding that children had for emotional undercurrents. Daddy gets that look when he's worried about grown-up things. Emma glanced at Jack, seeing her own pain reflected in his expression. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that sometimes the people you love have to leave not because they want to, but because staying would hurt everyone involved? I am worried about some things, Emma said carefully. But not about you and not about your daddy. You two are the best things that have happened to me in a very long time. Lily studied Emma's face with the serious expression she wore when processing complex information. Are you going away? The direct question hit Emma like a physical blow. She'd been trying to find a way to soften the goodbye to somehow make this easier, but Lily's innocent honesty cut straight through any euphemisms she might have offered. Yes, Emma whispered. I have to go away. Because of the grown-up problems. Because of the grown-up problems. Lily was quiet for a moment, then scrambled out of bed and wrapped her arms around Emma's waist with fierce determination. I don't want you to go, she said, her voice muffled against Emma's shirt. I like having you here. It feels like we're a family. Emma closed her eyes, fighting back tears that threatened to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, that Lily would get attached, would be hurt by her inevitable departure. But looking down at this brave, loving little girl who'd claimed her so completely, Emma realized that she wasn't the only one who would be wounded by this separation. I like that feeling too, Emma said softly, stroking Lily's hair. More than you'll ever know. Then why do you have to leave if we all like being together? Why can't you just stay? The question was so simple, so logical, from a child's perspective, that Emma found herself struggling for an answer that would make sense without revealing too much. Sometimes, Jack said gently, sitting down on the bed beside them. People have problems that are too big to solve by wanting something really badly. Emma has some of those kinds of problems. But you always tell me that there's no problem too big if people work together to solve it, Lily pointed out with devastating accuracy. Emma felt Jack's eyes on her, saw the slight nod that seemed to say your move. She could deflect, could give Lily some platitude about how this was for the best, could try to make this goodbye as painless as possible. Instead, she found herself sinking down to Lily's level, taking the little girl's hands in hers. Lily, you know how in some of your fairy tale books the princess has to make really hard choices to protect the people she loves. Lily nodded solemnly. Well, sometimes in real life people have to make those same kinds of hard choices. I have to leave because staying might put you and your daddy in danger, and I love you both too much to risk that. What kind of danger? Emma glanced at Jack, who gave her an encouraging nod. There are some very powerful people who want me to come back to a life I don't want to live. If they find me here, they might try to hurt your daddy to make me go with them. Lily's eyes went wide. Bad people. Not exactly bad, Emma said carefully, but people who think they know what's best for everyone else even when they're wrong. Lily processed this information with the same serious consideration she gave to math problems at school, like when Tommy Henderson's mom made him quit soccer, even though he loved it, because she thought piano lessons were more important. Something like that, but much more serious. Lily nodded, accepting this explanation, with the resilience that had helped her cope with her mother's death and all the other adult complications that had shaped her young life. When will you come back? She asked. The question nearly undid Emma completely. "Oh, sweetheart, I don't know if I'll be able to come back." "But you might." Emma looked helplessly at Jack, who seemed to understand her dilemma. "Lily," he said gently, "Emma has to go very far away, and it might be a very long time before we see her again. Maybe never." Lily's lower lip trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she hugged Emma even tighter. "Will you remember us? Every day?" Emma promised, her voice breaking slightly. "Every single day I'll remember the little girl who called me a princess and taught me how to play Go Fish and made me feel like I belonged somewhere. And will you remember that we love you?" Emma's tears finally spilled over. "Yes, baby girl. I'll remember that you love me, and I'll remember how much I love you too." They sat there for several minutes, holding each other, while the morning light grew stronger, and the sounds of the city waking up filtered through the windows. Finally, Lily pulled back and looked at Emma with red-rimmed eyes. "Can I give you something to take with you, so you won't forget?" "Of course." Lily scrambled over to her dresser and rummaged through the top drawer, finally emerging with a small, slightly worn friendship bracelet made of purple and pink string. "I made this at summer camp last year," she explained carefully, tying it around Emma's wrist. "The counselor said that friendship bracelets are magic as long as you wear one. The person who gave it to you will always love you no matter how far away they are." Emma stared down at the simple bracelet, her vision blurred by tears. It was the kind of thing she would have dismissed as childish nonsense just 3 days ago. Now it felt more precious than any of the expensive jewelry that filled her rooms back at her father's estate. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me. Really, really." Jack had been watching this exchange with an expression that Emma couldn't quite read. When Lily turned to him with expectant eyes, he seemed to understand that some gesture was required from him as well. "I don't have anything as special as Lily's bracelet," he said, reaching into his wallet and pulling out a small, creased photograph. "But I want you to have this." Emma took the photo with trembling hands. It showed Jack and Lily at what looked like a carnival or fair, both of them grinning at the camera with cotton candy-stained faces and prize ribbons pinned to their shirts. Lily looked impossibly young, maybe 4 years old, and Jack looked younger too, less worn down by the weight of single parenthood, more openly joyful. "That was taken about 6 months after Sarah died," Jack said quietly. "It was the first time either of us had really smiled since the funeral. Lily had just won a goldfish at the ring toss, and she was so proud. I knew we were going to be okay." "Jack, I can't take this," Emma protested. "This is a family memory." "You are family," Lily interrupted with the fierce certainty that only children possessed. "Maybe not the regular kind, but the kind you choose. Right, Daddy?" Jack's smile was sad but genuine. "Right, baby girl, the kind you choose." Emma clutched the photo to her chest, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they were giving her. In her entire life, no one had ever made her feel like she belonged anywhere the way these two people had in just 3 days. "I need to go now," she said, though the words felt like they were being torn from her chest. "Before I lose my courage." Jack nodded, though she could see the pain in his eyes. "Do you have somewhere safe to go, at least for today?" Emma had been dreading this question because the honest answer was no. She had the address of a women's shelter she'd found in the phone book, and enough money for maybe a week in a cheap motel, but beyond that, her plans were terrifyingly vague. "I'll figure it out," she said, the lie coming easier than the truth. "Emma," Jack said carefully, "there's something I want you to consider. Just hear me out before you say no." Emma tensed, recognizing the tone of someone about to make an offer that would be both tempting and impossible to accept. My brother Mike, the one I mentioned who crashes on our couch sometimes, he lives in Portland now. He's got a spare room in his apartment, and he owes me about a dozen favors. If you wanted, I could call him, ask him to let you stay there while you figure out your next move. Jack, no. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. Jack's voice was gentle but firm. Mike's a good guy, and Portland's far enough from here that your father's people aren't likely to look there first. It would give you time to get your bearings, maybe find work, establish some kind of life. Emma felt a flicker of hope that she immediately tried to suppress. What if they trace the connection? What if helping me puts your brother at risk? Mike's been in trouble before, nothing serious, just the kind of stupid mistakes young men make. He knows how to keep a low profile when necessary. Jack paused. Emma, you can't just disappear with no plan and no resources. That's not surviving. That's just prolonging the inevitable. Emma looked down at Lily, who was watching this conversation with the intense focus of a child trying to understand adult negotiations that would affect her world. Will she be safe there? Lily asked. With Uncle Mike? She'll be safe, Jack promised. Lily nodded, then turned to Emma. I think you should go to Portland. Uncle Mike is funny, and he makes really good pancakes. Almost as good as Daddy's. Despite everything, Emma found herself smiling. High praise indeed. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff, but Emma realized that every choice she'd made in the past 3 days had felt that way. Leaving her father's house, accepting Jack's help, staying for breakfast, letting herself care about these people, all of it had been a series of leaps of faith that had somehow led her to this moment. Okay, she said quietly. If your brother is willing, I'd be grateful for somewhere safe to land. Jack's relief was visible. I'll call him right now. He left the room, presumably to have a conversation that Emma couldn't hear, leaving her alone with Lily for what might be the last time. The little girl climbed onto her lap and snuggled against her chest, and Emma found herself memorizing the weight of her, the smell of her shampoo, the way her small fingers played with the friendship bracelet she'd just given away. Emma. Lily's voice was small against her shoulder. When I grow up, I want to be brave like you. Emma's breath caught. Oh, sweetheart, I'm not brave. Brave people don't run away from their problems. But you did run away, Lily pointed out with unarguable logic. You ran away from people who wanted to make you unhappy, and you found us instead. That sounds pretty brave to me. Emma held Lily tighter, amazed by the child's ability to reframe her cowardly flight as an act of courage. Maybe that was the gift of innocence, the ability to see heroism and survival hope in desperate choices. You're pretty wise for someone who still believes in the tooth fairy, Emma said softly. The tooth fairy is real, Lily corrected seriously. I have proof. But I think wisdom comes from paying attention to things, and I pay really good attention. Yes, you do. Jack returned a few minutes later, his expression cautiously optimistic. Mike says yes. He's actually excited about the company. Apparently he's been going a little stir-crazy in that apartment by himself. He can pick you up at the Greyhound station tonight if you can get there. Emma felt another wave of gratitude so intense it was almost painful. Jack, I don't know how I'll ever repay you for this. For everything. Take care of yourself, Jack said simply. Build a life you're proud of. That's all the repayment I need. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation and painful anticipation. Jack went to work for a half-day shift, leaving Emma and Lily to spend their last morning together. They made breakfast, actual edible pancakes this time, and Emma helped Lily pick out clothes for school, marveling at the way the little girl could discuss her wardrobe choices, with the seriousness of a diplomat negotiating international treaties. When it was time for Lily to leave for school, Emma knelt down in the hallway to say goodbye, trying to memorize every detail of this moment. "Be good for your daddy," she said, smoothing down Lily's freshly braided hair. "I will." And Emma, "Yes. When you're in Portland, will you send me a postcard so I know you're okay?" Emma's throat tightened. "If it's safe to do so, I promise I'll find a way to let you know I'm okay." "Good. And maybe someday when the grown-up problems are solved, you can come visit us." Emma couldn't speak around the lump in her throat, so she just nodded and pulled Lily into one last hug. After Lily left for school, the apartment felt impossibly empty. Emma packed her few belongings, the clothes Jack had given her, the photo, and Lily's friendship bracelet, which she hadn't taken off since receiving it. Everything else she was leaving behind belonged to a life she no longer wanted to claim. Jack returned from work at 2 p.m. carrying a small duffel bag and wearing an expression that suggested he'd been doing some thinking during his shift. "I got you this," he said, handing her the bag. "Some basic supplies for the trip, and a few things you might need when you get to Portland." Emma opened the bag to find clothes in her size jeans, t-shirts, undergarments, all with the tags still on. There was also a basic toiletry kit, a small amount of cash, and a cell phone that looked like it had seen better days. "Jack, this is too much," she protested. "It's not enough," he replied firmly. "The phone is old, but it works. My number's already programmed in, along with Mike's. Promise me you'll call when you get there safely." "I promise." Jack hesitated for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out something else, a small worn leather wallet. "This belonged to Sarah," he said quietly. "I've been carrying it around for 3 years, not really knowing what to do with it. But I think she would have wanted you to have it." Emma opened the wallet with trembling hands. Inside was Sarah's driver's license, showing a woman with dark hair and kind eyes who looked remarkably like an older version of Lily. There were also a few family photos, and tucked behind the license a small folded piece of paper. Emma unfolded it to find a handwritten note in feminine script. "Remember that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. You're braver than you know. S." "She wrote that for me during her last stay in the hospital," Jack explained, "when I was falling apart and convinced I couldn't handle raising Lily alone. But I think you need to hear it more than I do right now." Emma stared at the note, feeling as though Sarah Morrison was speaking to her across the divide between life and death, offering encouragement from someone who had faced her own impossible circumstances with grace and determination. "Thank you," Emma whispered. For everything. Jack, I need you to know that these 3 days with you and Lily, they've given me something I didn't even know I was missing." "What's that?" "Hope. The belief that there might be something better out there than what I was running from." Jack stepped closer, and for a moment Emma thought he might try to talk her out of leaving one more time. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her face, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Emma, I want you to know something. What happened here? You showing up in our lives. It wasn't just about us helping you. You helped us too. You reminded me that our little family doesn't have to be closed off from the world, that letting people in doesn't always have to end in loss." Emma leaned into his touch, allowing herself this one moment of connection before she had to walk away from everything that had come to matter to her. "I wish things were different," she said softly. "So do I. But wishing doesn't change the reality we're dealing with." They stood there in the afternoon light, filtering through the apartment windows, two people who had found something precious and were being forced to give it up before they'd had time to fully understand what it was. Finally, Jack stepped back, the spell broken by the practical demands of time and circumstance. "The bus station is about 20 minutes from here," he said. "If we leave now, we'll have time to get your ticket and grab something to eat before your bus leaves." Emma nodded, shouldering the duffel bag and taking one last look around the apartment that had been a sanctuary for 3 days. Her eyes lingered on Lily's drawings on the refrigerator, the small dining table where they'd shared meals and conversations, the couch where she'd first felt truly safe in longer than she could remember. "Ready?" Jack asked gently. "No," Emma said honestly. "But that doesn't matter, does it? Not usually." They made the trip to the bus station in relative silence, both lost in thoughts they couldn't share. Jack parked his truck in the short-term lot and walked with her into the terminal, a sprawling fluorescent-lit cavern that smelled of diesel fuel and human desperation. Emma bought her ticket, a one-way fare to Portland that would take 14 hours, with stops while Jack waited nearby, his hands shoved deep in his pockets and his expression carefully neutral. "You've got about an hour before boarding," the ticket agent informed her. "Bus leaves from Gate 7. They found seats in the waiting area, surrounded by other travelers who looked like they were running towards something or away from something, all of them carrying their stories in battered suitcases and tired eyes. "Emma," Jack said suddenly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Emma tensed. "Okay. Are you really going to be okay? Not just surviving, but actually okay?" The question caught her off guard, because no one had ever asked her that before. Not her father, not the tutors or advisors or handlers who had managed her life, not even herself, really. She'd spent so many years focused on meeting other people's expectations that she'd never stopped to consider what okay might look like for her. "I don't know," she said finally. "But for the first time in my life, I'm going to try to find out." Jack nodded, seeming satisfied with her honesty. "Good. Because you deserve to be okay, Emma. You deserve to be happy." "So do you," she replied. "You and Lily both. You deserve everything good this world has to offer." They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the ebb and flow of travelers around them. Emma found herself studying faces, wondering about the stories behind them, the choices that had led each person to this place at this moment. When the boarding announcement came over the intercom, Emma felt her heart begin to race. This was it, the point of no return, the moment when she would step onto that bus and leave behind the only real family she'd ever known. "I should go," she said, though she made no move to stand. "Yeah, you should." Still neither of them moved. Emma found herself memorizing Jack's face, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years of worry and laughter, the stubble that suggested he'd been too distracted to shave that morning, the way his mouth curved slightly upward even when he wasn't quite smiling. "Jack," she said suddenly, "if things were different, if I wasn't Winston Harrington's daughter, if I didn't come with all this baggage and danger, do you think we could we have been something?" Jack was quiet for a long moment, and Emma immediately regretted asking. It was an unfair question, impossible to answer honestly, without causing more pain than they were already dealing with. "Yeah," Jack said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I think we could have been everything." The admission hung between them like a bridge they couldn't cross, beautiful and tragic in equal measure. Emma felt tears threatening again, but she forced them back. She'd cried enough for one lifetime. Final boarding call for the 4:30 bus to Portland, Oregon, now departing from Gate 7. Emma stood on unsteady legs, shouldering her bag one more time. Jack rose with her, and for a moment, they stood facing each other in the middle of the crowded terminal, Two people saying goodbye to possibilities they'd never have the chance to explore. "Take care of yourself," Jack said softly. "Take care of Lily. Tell her. Tell her I'll think about her every day. She knows." Emma started to walk away, then turned back for one last look. Jack was still standing there watching her with an expression that would haunt her dreams for months to come. "Jack, yeah, thank you for seeing me. Not Emma Harrington, not the runaway heiress, just me. Thank you for letting me." Emma boarded the bus with tears streaming down her face, finding a window seat near the back where she could watch Jack's figure grow smaller as the bus pulled away from the station. She pressed her palm against the glass, a useless gesture that nonetheless felt necessary, and whispered the words she hadn't been brave enough to say out loud. "I love you both. I love you, and I'm sorry." The bus merged into traffic, carrying Emma toward an uncertain future in a city where no one knew her name or her story. She twisted Lily's friendship bracelet around her wrist and pulled out the photograph of Jack and Lily at the fair, studying their faces as the familiar landscape of Detroit gave way to highway and farmland. For 3 days, she had been part of something beautiful and real. For 3 days, she had known what it felt like to be loved, without conditions, to be valued for who she was rather than what she represented. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough, but it was more than she'd had before and more than she'd dared to hope for. As the miles stretched between her and the life she was leaving behind Emma Morrison for, that's how she'd begun to think of herself, made a silent promise. She would build something worthy of the gift Jack and Lily had given her. She would find a way to be brave, to be strong, to be the woman they had seen in her, even when she couldn't see it in herself. And someday, if she was very lucky and worked very hard, maybe she would find her way back to the people who had taught her what love really looked like. But for now, she had to learn how to save herself 1 mile at a time, one choice at a time, one breath at a time. The bus rolled on through the gathering dusk, carrying Emma toward whatever came next, while 14 hours behind her, a father and daughter sat down to dinner in a too-quiet apartment and tried to pretend that their hearts weren't breaking just a little bit more with each passing moment. The bus pulled into Portland's Union Station at 6:47 a.m., 14 hours and 3 time zones away from the life Emma had left behind. She stepped onto the platform with legs that felt like rubber and a heart that hadn't stopped aching since she'd watched Jack's figure disappear through the rear window. The Oregon morning was crisp and gray, with that particular Pacific Northwest dampness that seemed to seep into your bones within minutes. Mike Morrison was easy to spot. He had the same broad shoulders as his older brother, the same kind eyes, though his were currently bloodshot, from what Emma suspected had been a long night of preparation for her arrival. He held a handwritten sign that simply read Emma, and when their eyes met across the crowded station, his smile was warm and uncomplicated in a way that reminded her painfully of Jack. "You must be the famous Emma," Mike said, pulling her into a brief hug that smelled like coffee and aftershave. "Jack told me you were pretty, but he undersold it by about a mile." "Thank you for this," Emma said, her voice still hoarse from crying. "I know it's a lot to ask." "Hey, no worries. My brother doesn't ask for favors often, and when he does, it's because someone really needs help." Mike took her duffel bag with the casual ease of someone accustomed to helping people. "Besides, I've been rattling around in that apartment by myself for 6 months. The company will do me good." The ride to Mike's apartment took them through downtown Portland, past food trucks and coffee shops that were just beginning to stir to life. Emma found herself comparing everything to Detroit. The cleaner streets, the mountains visible in the distance, the way people seemed to walk with less hurried desperation than she was used to seeing. "So," Mike said, as they navigated traffic. Jack didn't give me a lot of details about your situation, which means it's either really complicated or really dangerous. Maybe both. Emma tensed, wondering how much Jack had revealed. It's complicated. Most things worth running away from are. Mike's tone was matter-of-fact, without judgment. But here's the thing, Portland's a good city for people who need to reinvent themselves. Nobody asks too many questions, and there are plenty of ways to make an honest living if you're willing to work. I've never really worked before, Emma admitted. Not real work anyway. Well, that's about to change. But don't worry, everyone's got to start somewhere. Mike's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, with exposed brick walls and enormous windows that let in floods of natural light. It was sparse but comfortable, decorated with the kind of furniture that suggested a man who'd learned to live well on a modest budget. The spare room's down the hall, Mike said, leading her past a kitchen that smelled like bacon and fresh coffee. It's not much, but it's private and the bed's comfortable. Bathroom's right next door. Emma looked around the small room, a bed, a dresser, a window that looked out onto the street below. After 3 years of living in her father's mansion, with its 12 bedrooms and staff quarters and rooms she'd never even set foot in, this felt like luxury simply because it was freely given. It's perfect, she said, and meant it. Good. Now I'm guessing you haven't eaten much in the past day or so, and you look like you're about to fall over. Why don't you get cleaned up and take a nap? We can talk about the practical stuff later. Emma wanted to protest that she didn't need to rest, that she needed to start figuring out her life immediately. But exhaustion hit her like a wave as soon as Mike mentioned sleep. She'd been running on adrenaline and fear for days, and her body was finally demanding payment for the emotional toll. Thank you, she said again, though the words felt inadequate. Emma, Mike said gently. Whatever you're running from, whatever brought you to my brother's door, you're safe here. I give you my word on that. Emma nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She closed the door to her new room and sank onto the bed, still wearing the clothes Jack had given her, still clutching the photograph of him and Lily. For the first time since leaving Detroit, she allowed herself to really cry. Not the controlled tears she'd shed on the bus, but the kind of raw, ugly sobbing that came from the deepest parts of grief. She cried for the life she'd left behind at her father's estate with all its gilded emptiness. She cried for the 3 days of happiness she'd found in Jack's apartment, and for the family she'd discovered too late and had to leave too soon. She cried for Lily, who would go to school that morning, expecting to hear about Emma's adventures in Portland, not knowing that every mile between them felt like a knife in Emma's chest. Most of all, she cried for the future she'd glimpsed in Jack's eyes, the possibility of belonging somewhere, of being part of something real and lasting and good. That future was gone now, sacrificed on the altar of safety and practicality. But the loss of it felt as devastating as any death. When she finally fell asleep, it was with Lily's friendship bracelet pressed against her cheek, and Sarah's note clutched in her hand, 2 talismans from a life she'd had to abandon, but would never forget. Emma woke 12 hours later to the sound of someone cooking dinner, and the realization that for the first time in weeks, she'd slept without nightmares. The apartment was filled with the warm smells of garlic and herbs, and late afternoon sunlight was streaming through her window with the golden quality that made everything look like a painting. She found Mike in the kitchen, stirring something that smelled like heaven in a large pot while humming along to music playing from a small radio. "Good you're awake," he said without turning around. "I was starting to worry that I'd have to check for a pulse. You sleep like the dead." "What time is it?" "Almost 6. You've been out for about 11 hours. Mike ladled soup into 2 bowls and gestured for her to sit at the small table. Figured you needed it. Emma accepted the bowl gratefully, realizing that she hadn't eaten anything substantial since breakfast with Jack and Lily nearly 24 hours earlier. The soup was simple chicken and vegetables in a rich broth, but it tasted better than anything from her father's private chef. "This is incredible," she said after several spoonfuls. "Thanks. Cooking relaxes me, and I had some thinking to do while you were sleeping." Mike sat across from her with his own bowl. "I've been trying to figure out how to help you without overstepping boundaries or making assumptions about what you need." Emma set down her spoon, suddenly nervous. "What kind of help?" "The practical kind. You need identification, you need work, you need a way to build a life here that doesn't depend on handouts from people you barely know." Mike's tone was gentle but direct. "Jack told me you've never really had a job, which means we need to start from scratch." "I have some money," Emma said quickly. "Not much, but money runs out. Skills don't." Mike leaned back in his chair, studying her with the same observational intensity she'd noticed in Jack. "Tell me what you're good at. And don't say nothing. Everyone's good at something." Emma thought about the question seriously. What was she good at? Years of private tutoring had given her a solid education, but no practical experience. She spoke French fluently and had basic conversational skills in Spanish and Italian. She could play piano, though she hadn't touched the keys in years. She knew how to navigate high society functions, how to make small talk with diplomats and business leaders, how to smile and look interested, while powerful men discussed deals that would affect thousands of lives. None of those skills seemed particularly relevant to building a life in Portland, Oregon. "I don't know," she admitted. "Everything I learned was designed to make me a suitable wife for someone in my father's social circle. Languages, music, art, history, etiquette, nothing that translates to the real world." "You speak multiple languages, 3 plus English." "That's something. Portland has a big international community, lots of businesses that need translators or people who can work with foreign clients." Mike made a note on a napkin. "What else?" "I read a lot. I know how to research things, how to organize information. Libraries, bookstores, research firms, all possibilities." Another note. "Keep going." Emma found herself thinking about the past few days, about the things she'd discovered about herself in Jack's apartment. "I'm good with children," she said quietly. "At least I think I am. Lily seemed to like me." Mike's expression softened. "Jack mentioned that you and Lily hit it off. That's a huge skill, Emma. Not everyone can connect with kids the way you did." "But I don't have any experience, any credentials." "You have something better than credentials. You have instincts." Mike finished his soup and pushed the bowl aside. "Look, I'm not saying this is going to be easy. You're starting from zero, and there will be jobs you can't get because you don't have a work history or references. But Portland's full of small businesses run by people who care more about character than resumes." Emma felt a flicker of hope, quickly followed by a wave of fear. "What if I'm terrible at it? What if I can't handle working for a living?" "Then you'll figure it out, just like everyone else does." Mike's smile was encouraging. "Emma, you had the courage to walk away from a life of luxury because it wasn't right for you. You survived 3 days on the streets of Detroit without getting killed. You trusted strangers to help you, and you formed a connection with a 6-year-old girl that was strong enough to break your heart. You think someone with that kind of strength can't learn how to wait tables or stock shelves?" Put that way, it did seem less impossible. Emma had always thought of herself as weak-sheltered, unprepared for the real world. But maybe Mike was right. Maybe surviving the past week required more strength than she'd given herself credit for. "Okay," she said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "Where do we start?" Tomorrow morning we get you a social security card and a driver's license under your real name. Then we start looking for work." Emma's blood went cold. "Mike, I can't use my real name. If my father's people are looking for me, they're looking for Emma Harrington, the runaway heiress. They're not looking for Emma Morrison, who's starting over in Portland with help from friends." Emma stared at him. "Morrison, Jack's idea. He figured you might need a new identity to go with your new life, and he thought you might like to keep the connection to the family that helped you." Mike's grin was slightly mischievous. "Legally, you'd be Emma Morrison's sister-in-law to Jack Morrison, recently widowed, and starting fresh on the West Coast. It's not foolproof, but it should buy you some time." Emma felt tears threatening again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. Even from 1,400 miles away, Jack was still trying to protect her, still finding ways to keep her safe. He really thought of that. He stayed up all night after he put you on the bus, calling in favors and working out details. "My brother's got a lot of connections from his factory days, people who can make things happen quietly." Mike's expression grew serious. "Emma, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about helping a stranger in need. Jack cares about you more than I've seen him care about anyone since Sarah died. He's taking risks to help you because he believes you're worth it." The weight of that revelation settled over Emma like a blanket. Jack was putting himself and potentially Lily at risk to give her a chance at a new life. The magnitude of his faith in her was both humbling and terrifying. "I won't let him down," she said quietly. "I won't let either of you down." "Good. But more importantly, don't let yourself down." Mike stood and began clearing the dishes. "Now let's talk about practical things. You'll need clothes for job interviews, basic supplies, maybe a haircut to change your look a bit. I can front you the money, and you can pay me back once you're working." They spent the next 2 hours planning Emma's transformation from runaway heiress to working woman. Mike proved to have an unexpected talent for logistics, mapping out everything from where to shop for affordable professional clothing to which neighborhoods had the most small businesses likely to hire someone without extensive experience. "One more thing," Mike said as they were finishing up. "Jack made me promise to give you this once you were settled." He handed Emma a sealed envelope with her name written on it in Jack's familiar handwriting. Her hands shook slightly as she opened it, revealing a single sheet of paper covered in his careful script. "Emma," the letter began. "If you're reading this, it means you made it to Portland safely, and Mike convinced you to stay long enough to read a letter from the guy who's probably messed up your life more than he's helped. I hope you're not too mad at me for taking liberties with your identity, but I figure Emma Morrison deserves a chance to build the life Emma Harrington never could." Emma pressed the letter against her chest, closing her eyes, as she imagined Jack writing these words in the quiet of his apartment after she'd gone. "I know you're scared," the letter continued. "I know this feels impossible and overwhelming and like you're walking into the unknown without a map. But Emma, you're stronger than you know. You proved that when you had the courage to leave a life that was slowly killing your spirit. You proved it when you trusted me enough to let us help you. And you'll prove it again every day as you build something new and true and yours." Emma's vision blurred as she read on. "Lily wants you to know that she still thinks you're a princess no matter what kind of work you end up doing. She says that princesses are defined by their hearts, not their circumstances, and that your heart is one of the biggest she's ever seen." I tend to agree with her assessment. A soft sob escaped Emma's lips, and Mike quietly left the room, giving her privacy to absorb Jack's words. "I need you to promise me something," Jack's letter concluded. "Promise me you won't just survive, promise me you'll thrive. Promise me you'll find work that means something to you people who value you for who you are, maybe even love again someday, with someone who deserves the incredible gift of your heart. Promise me you'll remember that you're not running from something anymore. You're running toward the life you were meant to live. The letter was signed simply, Love, Jack and Lily, and there was a small drawing in crayon at the bottom that looked like Emma standing in front of mountains with the words, "We love you, Princess Emma," written in Lily's careful 6-year-old handwriting. Emma folded the letter carefully and held it against her chest, feeling the weight of Jack's faith in her future and the warmth of Lily's unconditional love. For the first time since leaving Detroit, she felt something other than grief and fear. She felt possibility. The next morning, Emma woke before sunrise and found Mike already dressed and drinking coffee in the kitchen. "Ready for your first day as Emma Morrison?" he asked, handing her a steaming mug. "As ready as I'll ever be." They started at the Social Security office where Mike's carefully prepared paperwork and his easy charm with the bureaucrats smoothed what could have been a complicated process. By noon, Emma Morrison officially existed in the eyes of the federal government, complete with a Social Security number and the documentation she'd need to get a job. The DMV was next, where Emma's picture was taken for an Oregon driver's license that made her transformation complete. Looking at the small plastic card with her new name and Portland address, Emma felt like she was holding the key to a door she'd been trying to open her entire life. "How does it feel?" Mike asked as they walked back to his truck. "Terrifying," Emma admitted, "but also liberating." "Good. Terrifying and liberating is exactly how big changes are supposed to feel." They spent the afternoon shopping for what Mike called working person clothes, simple blouses and slacks, comfortable shoes, a blazer that could make any outfit look more professional. Emma was amazed by how much less expensive everything was compared to the boutiques she was used to, and how much more practical. "Try this," Mike said, handing her a simple blue dress that looked like it would be appropriate for an office job. "The color brings out your eyes." Emma looked at herself in the dressing room mirror, seeing a woman she barely recognized. Gone were the expensive cuts and designer labels that had defined her appearance for her entire life. In their place was someone who looked normal, approachable, real. "I look like a different person," she said when she emerged from the dressing room. "You look like yourself," Mike corrected. "Maybe for the first time." That evening, Mike helped Emma prepare for what would be her first job interview ever. They practiced common questions, worked on her handshake, and discussed how to present her lack of work experience as eagerness to learn rather than a liability. "Remember," Mike said, "confidence without arrogance, enthusiasm without desperation. And if they ask why you moved to Portland, you stick to the story, recent widow needed a fresh start, heard good things about the city." What if they can tell I'm lying? You're not lying about the important parts. You did need a fresh start, and you have heard good things about the city. Mike's smile was reassuring. The best cover stories are built on emotional truth, even if the facts are creatively arranged. Emma nodded, trying to absorb all the advice while battling the nerves that made her hands shake every time she thought about walking into a business and asking someone to hire her. "Mike," she said quietly, "what if I fail? What if I can't handle this? Then you try again, and again, until you succeed." Mike's voice was gentle but firm. "Emma, failure isn't falling down, it's staying down. You've already proven you know how to get back up." The next morning, Emma put on her new blue dress and walked into the first coffee shop on their list, with Mike's encouragement ringing in her ears. The manager, a harried-looking woman in her 40s, barely glanced at Emma's resume before shaking her head. "No experience in food service," she said briskly. "Can't afford to train someone from scratch. Try somewhere else." Emma left the coffee shop feeling like she'd been punched in the stomach, but Mike was waiting outside with a supportive smile and a gentle push toward the next business on their list. The second rejection came from a bookstore, where the owner spent 20 minutes explaining why he only hired people with extensive knowledge of contemporary literature. The third came from a clothing boutique, where Emma's obvious nervousness convinced the manager that she wouldn't be good with customers. By lunchtime, Emma was fighting tears and seriously considering whether this whole plan was just an elaborate form of torture. "I'm terrible at this," she said, as they sat on a bench in Pioneer Square sharing a sandwich from a food cart. "Maybe I should just go back to my father. At least then I wouldn't be wasting everyone's time." "Emma Morrison," Mike said firmly. "Look at me." She raised her head reluctantly. "It's been 4 hours. 4 hours of your new life, and you're ready to give up. The Emma I've been getting to know for the past 2 days is tougher than that. But they all said no, so far. They all said no so far." Mike's voice was patient but insistent. "Do you know how many jobs I applied for when I moved to Portland 17? I got turned down by 16 coffee shops, 3 restaurants, 2 bookstores, and a gas station, before someone finally said yes. That's how this works." Emma wiped her eyes with a napkin. "It's just, I've never been rejected before. Not like this. In my old life, people said yes to me because of who my father was, not because of anything I brought to the table." "And how did that feel?" Emma thought about the question seriously. "Empty. Like I was wearing someone else's life." "Exactly. These rejections, they sting because they're real. Because you're putting yourself out there as Emma Morrison, not as Winston Harrington's daughter." Mike crumpled up his sandwich wrapper and tossed it in a nearby trash can. "The yes, when it comes, is going to mean something, because you'll have earned it yourself." Emma felt something shift inside her chest, not quite hope, but not despair either. Determination, maybe, or stubbornness. "Okay," she said, standing up and brushing crumbs off her dress. "Where's the next place on the list?" Mike's grin was proud and encouraging. "That's the Emma Morrison I was hoping to meet." The next stop was a small family restaurant called Mama Rosa's, tucked between a laundromat and a used bookstore in a neighborhood that had clearly seen better days. The exterior was worn but clean, with cheerful red and white checkered curtains in the windows and the smell of garlic and herbs wafting from the open door. Emma took a deep breath and walked inside, her heart hammering against her ribs. The interior was cozy and welcoming, with mismatched tables and chairs that somehow worked together to create an atmosphere of warmth and authenticity. A woman in her 60s stood behind the counter, her gray hair pulled back in a neat bun, and her face creased with the kind of lines that came from years of smiling. "Can I help you, dear?" the woman asked, her accent carrying just a hint of Italian inflection. "I'm looking for work," Emma said, pleased that her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "I don't have experience in restaurants, but I'm willing to learn." The woman studied Emma's face with the kind of attention that suggested she was seeing more than just another job applicant. "You're not from around here," she observed. "No, ma'am. I moved to Portland recently. I'm starting over." "Starting over." The woman repeated the words thoughtfully. "That takes courage. What's your name?" "Emma Morrison." "I'm Rosa Benedetto, but everyone calls me Mama Rosa. This is my restaurant. My husband Sal's in the kitchen." Rosa continued to study Emma with sharp, kind eyes. "Why do you want to work here, Emma Morrison?" Emma had practiced this answer, but standing in front of Rosa, the rehearsed words felt wrong. Instead, she found herself speaking from the heart. Because I've never really worked before, not real work that mattered to other people. And because this place feels warm and welcoming, like somewhere people come not just for food, but for family. Emma paused, feeling exposed but determined to be honest. I don't have much family left, so I understand how precious that is. Rosa was quiet for a long moment, and Emma was sure she was about to receive another rejection. Instead, the older woman came around the counter and took Emma's hands in hers, studying them with interest. Soft hands, Rosa observed, but strong, good for learning. She looked up at Emma's face. You've been crying recently. Emma's cheeks burned with embarrassment. I'm sorry, I know that's not professional. Nonsense. Tears mean you care about something. People who don't care don't make good employees. Rosa released Emma's hands and crossed her arms. Tell me about starting over. What are you starting over from? Emma felt the weight of Rosa's attention and realized that this woman would know if she lied. More than that, she deserved the truth, or as much of it as Emma could safely share. A life that wasn't really mine, Emma said quietly. Expectations I couldn't meet, choices that were made for me instead of by me. I needed to find out who I could be if I was allowed to choose for myself. Rosa nodded, as if this explanation made perfect sense. And what have you learned so far? That choosing for yourself is terrifying and wonderful and harder than I ever imagined. Emma met Rosa's eyes directly, and that there are still good people in the world who help strangers even when they don't have to. Good answer. Rosa smiled and her entire face transformed with warmth. Emma Morrison, how would you like to learn the restaurant business? Emma felt her knees go weak with relief. You mean... I mean, we'll start you as a server, see how you handle customers and stress and the controlled chaos that is dinner rush. Sal will teach you about food. He's been cooking for 45 years and loves to share his knowledge. If you work hard and pay attention, maybe in a few months, we talk about more responsibilities. Thank you, Emma said, her voice shaky with emotion. Thank you so much. I promise I won't let you down. The only way you'll let me down is if you don't show up, Rosa said practically. Can you start tomorrow morning? We'll need you here at 10 for training. Yes, absolutely. I'll be here. Good. And Emma? Rosa's expression grew serious. Everyone who works here becomes family. That means we take care of each other, but it also means we tell each other the truth. If you're running from something dangerous, something that might put my other employees at risk, I need to know. Emma felt a chill of fear, but Rosa's directness demanded honesty in return. I'm not running from anything criminal, Emma said carefully. But there are people from my old life who might try to force me to go back to something I don't want. I can't promise that won't cause complications. Rosa nodded thoughtfully. We'll handle complications if they come. Family protects family. Emma walked out of Mama Rosa's in a daze, hardly able to believe that she'd actually done it. She'd gotten a job, her first real job, based on nothing but her willingness to work and learn. Mike was waiting across the street, and his face split into a huge grin when he saw her expression. I take it that went better than the others, he said. I got it, Emma said, and then louder. I got the job. Mike swept her up in a hug that lifted her feet off the ground, spinning her around, right there on the sidewalk, while she laughed with pure, uncomplicated joy. I'm so proud of you, Mike said, setting her down but keeping his hands on her shoulders. Jack is going to be over the moon when I tell him. At the mention of Jack's name, Emma's happiness was tinged with longing. She wished she could call him, wished she could share this moment with the man who had made it possible. But that wasn't safe, not yet. Maybe not ever. "Will you tell him?" she asked. "And Lily? Will you tell them that Emma Morrison got her first job today?" "I'll tell them," Mike promised. "And Emma, they're going to be so damn proud of you." That evening, Emma called the number Jack had programmed into her phone, holding her breath as it rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello." Jack's voice was cautious, probably because he didn't recognize the number. "It's me," Emma said softly. "It's Emma." The relief in Jack's voice was immediate and palpable. "Emma, thank God. Are you okay? Did you make it to Portland safely?" "I made it. Mike's been wonderful, just like you said he would be." Emma curled up on her bed, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "Jack, I got a job today. My first real job." "Emma, that's incredible. Tell me everything." Emma found herself pouring out the details of her day, the rejections, the fears, the moment when Rosa Benedetto had looked into her eyes and decided to take a chance on her. Jack listened to every word, asking questions and offering encouragement that made Emma feel like she was sharing her triumph with someone who truly understood what it meant. "I'm so proud of you," Jack said, when she finished, his voice rough with emotion. "Sarah always said that the best victories are the ones you win for yourself, and Emma, this is all yours." "How's Lily?" Emma asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. "She's adjusting. She asks about you every day, wants to know if you're safe, if you're happy, if you remember the friendship bracelet." Jack's voice grew softer. "She misses you, Emma. We both do." Emma closed her eyes, feeling the distance between them like a physical ache. "I miss you both too. More than I can explain." "Emma," Jack said quietly, "I need you to know something. What you did leaving, building a new life, getting this job, it's the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Don't ever doubt that. Sometimes it doesn't feel brave. Sometimes it feels like I'm just running away from problems I should have faced. You didn't run away from problems, Emma. You ran towards solutions. There's a big difference." They talked for another 20 minutes, sharing details about their days, carefully avoiding the topic of when or if they might see each other again. When Emma finally hung up, she felt simultaneously better and worse connected to the people she loved, but achingly aware of the distance that separated them. 3 weeks later, Emma was settling into a routine that would have been unimaginable a month earlier. She woke at 7, walked to work through Portland's tree-lined streets, and spent her days learning the intricate dance of restaurant service under Rosa's patient guidance. The work was harder than she'd expected. Her feet ached. Her back protested from hours of standing, and dealing with difficult customers required diplomatic skills she hadn't known she possessed. But it was also incredibly satisfying in ways she couldn't have anticipated. There was something deeply fulfilling about bringing people food that made them smile, about being part of a team that worked together to create small moments of joy and comfort for strangers. "You're a natural," Rosa told her one afternoon, as Emma efficiently handled a table of 8 tourists who had specific dietary restrictions and complicated orders. "Most people take months to develop that kind of confidence with customers." Emma beamed at the praise, feeling proud of skills she'd developed through her own effort and determination. At Mama Rosa's, she wasn't Winston Harrington's daughter or a trust fund baby playing at working. She was simply Emma, a woman who showed up every day, worked hard, and contributed to something meaningful. Her co-workers had accepted her with the kind of easy warmth that came from shared labor and mutual respect. There was Maria, the other waitress, who taught Emma the shortcuts that made busy shifts manageable. Tony, the busboy, who was working his way through community college, and shared Emma's love of books. And Sal Rosa's husband, who had indeed taken Emma under his wing and was teaching her the fundamentals of Italian cooking with the patience of a man who truly loved his craft. "Cooking is like love," Sal told her one quiet afternoon as he showed her how to make fresh pasta. "It requires attention, patience, and the willingness to keep trying until you get it right." Emma found herself thinking about those words as she walked home from work, twisting Lily's friendship bracelet around her wrist and wondering if the life she was building in Portland could ever feel complete without the people who had first shown her what family could look like. The answer came sooner than she expected, and in a way that would change everything once again. Emma was working the evening shift on a Thursday when she noticed the man in the expensive suit sitting alone at table 7. He'd ordered a simple pasta dish, but seemed more interested in watching the staff than eating his food. There was something about his careful attention, the way his eyes followed her movements, that made Emma's skin crawl with familiar fear. She tried to tell herself she was being paranoid, that not every well-dressed stranger was a threat. But when the man left without finishing his meal and without leaving a tip, Emma's instincts screamed danger. "Rosa," she said quietly as they were closing up, "did that man at table 7 seem odd to you?" Rosa, who had been counting the day's receipts, looked up with sharp eyes. "The one in the suit who asked too many questions about you." Emma's blood went cold. "What kind of questions? How long you'd worked here, where you lived, whether you had family in Portland?" Rosa set down her pencil and gave Emma her full attention. "Emma, honey, is this the trouble you mentioned when I hired you?" Before Emma could answer, the phone behind the counter rang. Rosa answered it with her usual cheerful greeting, but her expression quickly changed to one of concern. "Emma," she said, covering the receiver with her hand, "it's for you. A man who says it's urgent family business." Emma's hands shook as she took the phone, knowing with sick certainty who would be on the other end. "Hello, Emma." Winston Harrington's voice was exactly as she remembered, smooth, cultured, and absolutely certain of its own authority. Hearing it in the warm, friendly atmosphere of Mama Rosa's felt like watching a snake slither into a garden. "How did you find me?" Emma asked, though she already knew the answer didn't matter. "Did you really think you could disappear forever?" "You're my daughter, Emma. I have resources you can't begin to imagine." Winston's tone was conversational, almost fond, as if they were discussing the weather. "I must say this little adventure of yours has been quite educational. A restaurant job. How quaint." "I'm not coming back," Emma said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Oh, but you are. You see, I've had some very interesting conversations with officials in Detroit. It seems there are some questions about a certain sanitation worker who may have been harboring a missing person. Questions that could affect his employment, his custody arrangements, his entire future." Emma felt the room spinning around her. "You leave Jack alone. He didn't do anything wrong." "Of course he didn't. He's guilty of nothing more than misplaced gallantry. But perceptions matter. Emma, and I'm afraid the perception of a single father who takes strange women into his home where his young daughter lives, well, that's the kind of perception that tends to stick." "You bastard," Emma whispered. "Such language. Your mother would be appalled." Winston's chuckle was cold as ice. "Here's what's going to happen, my dear. You're going to return to where you belong. You're going to marry James Whitmore as planned, and you're going to take your place in the family business. In exchange, Mr. Morrison's troubles disappear, and he continues his admirably ordinary life with his charming daughter. And if I refuse, then Mr. Morrison learns what it's like to have his life destroyed by forces beyond his control. I believe he has experience with that particular kind of helplessness, doesn't he?" Lost his wife to cancer, lost his job when the factory closed. It would be such a shame if he lost his daughter too. Emma closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her new life crumbling around her. Winston wasn't just threatening Jack's job or reputation, he was threatening Lily. That innocent, loving little girl who had called Emma a princess and made friendship bracelets with magic properties. "How do I know you'll keep your word?" Emma asked. "Because, my dear, I always get what I want, and what I want is my daughter home where she belongs. I have no interest in destroying Mr. Morrison once that objective is achieved." Emma looked around Mama Rosa's kitchen, seeing Rosa's concerned face the evidence of the life she'd been building, brick by brick, over the past month. All of it was about to be swept away by the same forces she'd been running from since the beginning. "I need time to—" "You have 24 hours, Winston interrupted smoothly. "There's a car waiting outside to take you to the airport. Your flight to Chicago leaves in 3 hours, and you'll be met there by my security team. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Emma, for everyone's sake." The line went dead, leaving Emma staring at the receiver in her trembling hand. Through the window, she could see a black sedan parked across the street, its engine running and its windows too dark to see through. "Emma?" Rosa's voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emma set down the phone and turned to face the woman who had given her a chance when no one else would, who had made her feel like part of a family again, who was about to lose an employee because Emma had been foolish enough to think she could escape the gilded cage she'd been born into. "I'm sorry," Emma whispered. "I'm so sorry, but I have to go." "Go where, Emma? What's happening?" "Back to my old life. Back to the people I was trying to escape." Emma's voice broke as she looked around the kitchen one last time. "Rosa, I want you to know that working here, being part of your family, it was the best month of my life." Rosa came around the counter and took Emma's hands in hers, the same gesture she'd made on the day they first met. "If you're in trouble, we can help. That's what family does." Emma squeezed Rosa's hands, memorizing the warmth and strength in them. "Some trouble is too big for family to handle. But thank you for giving me the chance to find out who I could be, even if it was only for a little while." Emma walked toward the back exit, knowing that the black sedan would follow her wherever she went. As she reached the door, Rosa called out to her, "Emma Morrison." Emma turned back, tears streaming down her face. "You remember who you are now," Rosa said fiercely. "Whatever they try to make you become, you remember who you really are. Emma Morrison exists now, even if Emma Harrington has to come back." Emma nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. Then she walked out into the Portland evening where the black sedan was indeed waiting to take her back to a life she'd thought she'd escaped forever. As the car pulled away from Mama Rosa's, Emma pressed her face against the window and watched her new life disappear into the distance. But Rosa's words echoed in her mind, and she realized that something fundamental had changed during her month of freedom. She wasn't the same frightened girl who had run away from her engagement announcement. She was Emma Morrison now too, and that woman was stronger than Winston Harrington could possibly imagine. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The flight back to Chicago felt like traveling backward through time, each mile taking Emma further from the woman she'd become, and closer to the gilded prison she'd tried so desperately to escape. She sat in first class, surrounded by luxury that now felt suffocating, watching the lights of cities pass below like fallen stars. The friendship bracelet on her wrist had been confiscated by Winston's security team as inappropriate, but Emma could still feel its phantom weight, a reminder of the love she was being forced to leave behind. Winston was waiting at O'Hare with his usual entourage, lawyers' assistants, and security personnel who moved around him like satellites orbiting a cold, distant planet. He embraced Emma in front of the cameras that seemed to materialize from nowhere, the perfect picture of a relieved father reunited with his wayward daughter. "Welcome home, darling," he murmured against her ear, his voice warm for the benefit of observers, but carrying an undertone of steel that only Emma could hear. "I trust you've gotten this foolishness out of your system." Emma forced a smile for the cameras playing her part in the carefully choreographed performance. But inside she was cataloging everything: the reporters who had been strategically placed, the security arrangements, the way Winston's team controlled every aspect of the narrative. She was no longer the naive girl who had fled this world 6 weeks ago. She was Emma Morrison now, too, and Emma Morrison paid attention to details. The ride to the Harrington estate took 40 minutes through Chicago's affluent northern suburbs, past manicured lawns and houses that looked more like monuments to wealth than homes. Emma stared out the window, remembering how she'd once thought this world represented safety and belonging. Now it looked like exactly what it was: a beautiful cage designed to contain rather than nurture. "You've caused quite a stir," Winston said conversationally as they drove. "The engagement announcement was postponed naturally, but James has been remarkably understanding about your episode. The wedding is rescheduled for next month." "Next month?" Emma's voice cracked despite her efforts to remain calm. "That's impossible. I need time." "Time for what?" "To run away again, to embarrass the family further." Winston's tone remained pleasant, but Emma could see the hardness in his eyes. "No, darling. The time for adolescent rebellion is over. You're going to marry James. You're going to take your place in the merger of our companies, and you're going to do it with grace and dignity." Emma fell silent, knowing that arguing would only make things worse. But her mind was racing, processing possibilities and escape routes, with the strategic thinking that a month of real-world survival had taught her. She wasn't the same person who had run away in desperation. She had allies now, people who cared about her for herself rather than her net worth. More importantly, she had discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known existed. The Harrington mansion looked exactly as she remembered: imposing, pristine, and utterly without warmth. Staff members lined the entrance hall to welcome her home, their faces carefully neutral, in the way that servants learned to perfect. Emma recognized each of them, but realized with a start that she'd never actually known any of their names or stories. In her old life, they had been furniture and visible fixtures in a world where only certain people mattered. "Miss Emma," said Mrs. Patterson, the head housekeeper, her voice carefully formal. "Welcome home. Your room has been prepared exactly as you left it." "Thank you," Emma replied, and the woman's eyes widened slightly at being directly acknowledged. It was such a small thing, but Emma realized that even the smallest acts of recognition could have power in a world built on hierarchy and invisibility. Her childhood bedroom was a shrine to the person she'd been expected to become: pale pink walls, antique furniture that had never been truly lived in, and closets full of clothes chosen by stylists rather than personal preference. The walls were covered with awards and certificates that documented a life of hollow achievements: charity luncheon attendance, debutante ball participation, educational milestones at elite private schools. Not a single item in the room reflected who Emma actually was or what she actually loved. Emma sat on the edge of her canopy bed and pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number she'd memorized, but had been afraid to call during her captivity on the plane. "Hello?" Jack's voice sounded tired, stressed in a way that made Emma's heart clench. "It's me," she said softly, then quickly added, "Don't say my name. I don't know if this line is secure." Jack's sharp intake of breath was audible even through the phone. "Jesus. Are you okay? Where are you?" I'm back. My father found me and he threatened. Emma's voice caught. Jack, he threatened you and Lily. I couldn't let him hurt you. God damn it, Emma, you should have called me. We could have figured something out together. He has investigators, lawyers, connections everywhere. He would have destroyed your life just to prove a point. Emma wiped away tears that she hadn't realized were falling. How is she? How's Lily? Jack was quiet for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was heavy with exhaustion. She's been asking for you every day. She made me call Mike 3 times last week to make sure you were okay in Portland. I don't know how to explain this to her. Emma closed her eyes, imagining Lily's face when Jack told her that the princess wasn't coming back after all. Tell her I love her. Tell her I'll always love her no matter what happens. Emma, listen to me. This isn't over. There has to be a way. There isn't. Emma interrupted, though saying the words felt like tearing out her own heart. Jack, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll take care of yourself and Lily. Don't try to fight this. He's too powerful, and I can't bear the thought of you getting hurt because of me. You're asking me to just let you disappear back into that world. I'm asking you to keep yourself and your daughter safe. Jack was silent for so long that Emma thought the connection might have been lost. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I love you, he said simply. I know we never said it. I know the timing is impossible, but I love you, Emma Morrison, and I'm not giving up on you. Emma's breath caught, and for a moment she couldn't speak around the lump in her throat. I love you too, she whispered. Both of you. That's why I have to do this. Emma. The line went dead as Emma's bedroom door opened without warning. Winston stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 of his security personnel, his expression calm but dangerous. I thought we might need to have a conversation about boundaries, he said, stepping into the room and closing the door behind him. Such as the fact that contact with your friends from your recent adventure is no longer appropriate. You were listening to my call. I was protecting my family's interests and my family's reputation. Winston moved to the window, looking out over the perfectly manicured grounds. Emma, I understand that you formed some sentimental attachments during your time away, but those attachments are a luxury we can no longer afford. They're not attachments. They're the only real relationships I've ever had. Winston turned back to her, his expression almost pitying. Reality, my dear, is what we make it. And the reality is that you are a Harrington with all the responsibilities and obligations that entails. Your little experiment in ordinary life is over. Emma stood up, drawing on every ounce of strength she'd discovered during her weeks of freedom. What if I refuse? What if I simply won't marry James or take part in your business merger? Then Mr. Morrison and his daughter will discover what it's like to have their lives systematically destroyed by forces beyond their control. Winston's voice remained conversational, but there was no warmth in his eyes. Social services will receive reports about his suitability as a parent. His employer will hear concerns about his reliability. His landlord will discover reasons to terminate his lease. These things happen, Emma. Unfortunate coincidences that tend to cluster around people who've made poor choices. Emma felt sick as she realized the scope of her father's reach, the casual cruelty with which he could dismantle the lives of people he'd never met. Jack and Lily weren't just innocent bystanders. They were weapons being held against her insurance policies to guarantee her compliance. You're a monster, she said quietly. I'm a businessman who protects his investments. You, my dear, represent a considerable investment. Winston moved toward the door, then paused. The engagement party is tomorrow evening. James is quite excited to see you again. I trust you'll make the appropriate effort to be charming." After Winston left, Emma sat alone in her childhood room and tried to process the magnitude of her situation. She was trapped not just by physical constraints, but by emotional ones that were far more powerful than any lock or key. Her freedom had been purchased with the safety of the people she loved most, and Winston knew exactly how to exploit that vulnerability. But as Emma stared at her reflection in the ornate mirror across the room, she realized that something fundamental had changed. The woman looking back at her wasn't the frightened girl who had fled this house 6 weeks ago. This was someone who had survived on the streets, who had learned to work for a living, who had discovered what real love looked like when it was given freely rather than as a tool for control. Emma Morrison still existed even here in the heart of the Harrington Empire. And Emma Morrison was stronger than Winston could possibly imagine. The engagement party took place in the Harrington Mansion's grand ballroom, a cavernous space filled with Chicago's social and business elite. Emma wore a designer gown chosen by Winston's stylists, her hair and makeup done by professionals who had transformed her back into the perfect Harrington daughter. She looked exactly like she was supposed to look: beautiful, elegant, compliant. But inside she was planning. James Whitmore was waiting for her at the bottom of the curved staircase, looking handsome and successful in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. He was everything her father wanted in a son-in-law: wealthy, well-connected, ambitious in exactly the right ways. He was also, Emma realized as he took her hand and smiled for the photographers, completely unaware that she was anything more than an asset to be acquired. "You look stunning, Emma," James said, his voice warm but somehow impersonal. "I was worried about you during your absence, but you're home now, and that's all that matters." Emma forced a smile, playing her role while her mind catalogued every exit, every security checkpoint, every potential weakness in the elaborate production surrounding them. "Thank you for being so understanding," she said, the words feeling like ash in her mouth. The evening proceeded exactly as planned: speeches about the merging of two great families, toasts to the happy couple, endless conversations about business deals and social obligations. Emma moved through it all like an actress in a play she hadn't auditioned for, smiling and nodding and saying exactly what was expected of her. But she was also watching, learning, preparing. At precisely 9:47 p.m. during her father's toast to the engaged couple, Emma excused herself to powder her nose. Instead of going to the ladies' room, she slipped into Winston's private study and accessed the computer she'd watched him use countless times during her childhood. The password was exactly what she'd expected: her mother's maiden name, combined with her birth date. Winston's arrogance had always been one of his few weaknesses, and tonight it would be his downfall. Emma's fingers flew across the keyboard as she accessed files she'd never been meant to see, business communications that revealed the true scope of Harrington Industries' activities, including several ventures that existed in legal gray areas. More importantly, she found the correspondence about the Morrison situation, including detailed plans for the systematic harassment that would begin the moment Emma showed any sign of resistance to her engagement. But the most damaging discovery was a series of emails between Winston and several city officials in Detroit, discussing ways to address the problem of certain sanitation workers who had been asking questions about pension fund irregularities. Jack's name wasn't mentioned specifically, but the implications were clear. Winston hadn't just threatened to destroy Jack's life as leverage against Emma. He was already in the process of doing so, regardless of her compliance. Emma's blood ran cold as she realized the scope of her father's deception. There had never been any intention of leaving Jack and Lily alone. They were loose ends to be tied up, potential witnesses to be silenced, obstacles to be removed. Her surrender had bought them nothing, except a temporary delay in their destruction. The revelation crystallized something in Emma's mind, a clarity born of absolute desperation and absolute love. She couldn't save Jack and Lily by sacrificing herself, because Winston would destroy them anyway. The only way to protect them was to destroy Winston's ability to hurt anyone ever again. Emma copied the files to a flash drive with hands that were surprisingly steady, her heart hammering, but her mind crystal clear. She was no longer thinking like the sheltered heiress who had fled this house in desperation. She was thinking like Emma Morrison, who had learned that sometimes survival required you to fight back with everything you had. Emma. She spun around to find James standing in the doorway, his expression confused and slightly concerned. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, stepping into the study and closing the door behind him. "Everyone's looking for you." Emma's mind raced as she calculated her options. James wasn't evil like Winston, but he was complicit in a system that treated people like commodities. More importantly, he was between her and the door, and she couldn't afford to let him raise an alarm. "I was looking for something," Emma said, carefully slipping the flash drive into her purse. "Looking for what?" James moved closer, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took in her position near Winston's computer. "Emma, what's going on?" For a moment, Emma considered trying to lie her way out of the situation. Then she looked at James's face, handsome, privileged, utterly convinced of his own righteousness, and realized that she was tired of pretending to be someone she wasn't. "I'm looking for evidence of the crimes my father commits to maintain his business empire," she said calmly. "And I found it." James's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Emma, what are you talking about? Your father is a respected businessman." "My father is a criminal who uses his wealth and connections to destroy anyone who gets in his way, including the family that helped me when I ran away from this nightmare the first time." "You're not making sense. Emma, you've been under a lot of stress." "I'm making perfect sense for the first time in my life." Emma moved toward the door, but James stepped sideways to block her path. "I can't let you leave like this," he said, his voice taking on an authoritative tone that Emma recognized from countless interactions with powerful men who expected immediate compliance. "You're clearly upset, not thinking rationally. Why don't you sit down and we can talk about whatever's bothering you?" Emma looked at James, really looked at him, and saw her entire future mapped out in his confident expression. Years of being managed, controlled, dismissed, whenever her thoughts and feelings didn't align with his vision of how things should be. It was Winston all over again, just wrapped in a younger, more attractive package. "No," she said simply. James blinked clearly, not expecting such direct defiance. "Excuse me. No, I won't sit down. No, I won't be managed like a hysterical child. And no, I won't marry you or anyone else chosen for me by men who think women are assets to be traded." Emma's voice grew stronger with each word. "I'm leaving James. Tonight. And you can either get out of my way, or you can explain to my father how you let his investment walk out the front door." James's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Emma, you're being ridiculous. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities, your family, your obligations. Watch me." Emma pushed past him toward the door, but James grabbed her wrist, his grip tight enough to leave marks. "I don't think so," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You're going to calm down, come back to the party, and stop this tantrum before you embarrass everyone involved." Emma looked down at his hand on her wrist, then back up at his face, seeing the entitled rage of a man who had never been denied anything he wanted. For a moment, she was the frightened girl who had learned to comply to avoid confrontation. Then she remembered Jack's gentle strength, Rose's fierce protection, Lily's absolute faith in her courage. "Let go of me," Emma said quietly. Not until you listen to reason. Emma's knee connected with James's groin with all the force she could muster, a self-defense move she'd learned from a YouTube video during her first terrifying night on Detroit's streets. James doubled over with a strangled cry, releasing her wrist as he gasped for air. "I said, let go," Emma said calmly, stepping over his crumpled form and walking out of the study. The hallway outside was empty, the sounds of the party drifting from the distant ballroom, like music from another world. Emma walked quickly toward the servants' staircase, knowing it would take her to the kitchen exit without passing through any of the main reception areas. She was halfway down the stairs when her phone buzzed with a text message. Emma's heart stopped as she read the words on the screen. Lily Morrison, age 6, Franklin Elementary School, room 142. Sometimes the best way to send a message is through those who matter most. W.H. Emma's hands shook as she realized what Winston was telling her. He wasn't just threatening Jack anymore, he was threatening Lily directly. The innocent little girl who had called her a princess, who had made friendship bracelets and believed in the magic of unconditional love, was now a target in her father's war of control. The phone buzzed again with another message, this one containing a photograph that made Emma's blood turn to ice. It showed Lily walking out of school, her backpack bouncing, as she skipped down the steps, completely unaware that someone was watching her, photographing her, turning her childhood innocence into ammunition. Emma sank onto the stairs, overwhelmed by the magnitude of Winston's cruelty. He wasn't just threatening to hurt the people she loved, he was demonstrating that he could reach them anywhere, anytime, regardless of distance or protection. Lily was 1,000 miles away, but Winston's reach was longer than geography. For a moment, Emma considered surrendering, going back upstairs to apologize to James and accept the gilded cage that had been prepared for her. It would be easier, safer for everyone involved. She could live with being miserable if it meant keeping Lily safe. Then she thought about Rosa's words. "You remember who you are now. Whatever they try to make you become, you remember who you really are." Emma Morrison wouldn't surrender. Emma Morrison would fight back with everything she had, even if the odds were impossible. Especially if the odds were impossible. Emma stood up, her resolve hardening into something unbreakable. Winston wanted to play games with the lives of innocent people. Then he was about to discover that his sheltered daughter had learned some new rules during her time in the real world. She made it to the kitchen without being seen, slipping out the service entrance into the cool Chicago night. Her designer heels clicked on the pavement as she walked quickly toward the garage, where she knew Winston kept his collection of vintage cars. She needed transportation, and more importantly, she needed to get to a place where she could make phone calls without being monitored. 20 minutes later, Emma was driving Winston's prized 1967 Mustang convertible through Chicago's late-night streets, her engagement gown billowing in the wind as she pushed the car faster than she'd ever driven in her life. The symbolism wasn't lost on her, stealing Winston's most treasured possession to escape the life he'd tried to force her into. She pulled into the parking lot of an all-night diner on the city's south side, a place as far from her usual world as she could imagine. The fluorescent lights were harsh and unflattering. The coffee was terrible, but the phone booth in the corner worked, and that's all she needed. Her first call was to Mike Morrison in Portland. "Emma, Jesus, it's almost midnight. Are you okay?" "Mike, I need you to listen carefully. My father has threatened Lily directly. He has people watching her, photographing her. Jack and Lily are in immediate danger." "Shit. What do you need me to do? Can you get to Detroit tonight? I need someone I trust to help get them somewhere safe while I deal with my father." "I'm already grabbing my keys. Give me addresses, details, everything you've got." Emma's second call was to Rosa at Mama Rosa's, knowing the restaurant would be closed, but hoping Rosa would answer her home phone. "Emma, honey, is that you? Are you safe? Rosa, I need to ask you for something, and you can say no if it's too dangerous. Tell me what you need." "I need you to contact some reporters, not the society page reporters who cover my father's events, but real journalists who investigate corruption and criminal activity. I have evidence that could destroy my father's empire, but I need people who won't be bought or intimidated." Rosa was quiet for a moment, then said, "My nephew Tony, the one who works at the restaurant. His girlfriend is a reporter for the Chicago Tribune. Investigative stuff. She's honest, and she's fearless. Would that work?" "That would work perfectly." Emma's third call was the hardest one to make. She dialed Jack's number, her heart breaking, as she imagined his face when he heard what she had to tell him. "Emma, thank God I've been worried sick since our call was cut off. Jack, listen to me. You and Lily are in immediate danger. My father has people watching her at school. You need to pack a bag and get out of your apartment right now." "What, Emma, slow down. There's no time. My brother Mike is driving to Detroit tonight. He should be there in about 6 hours. I need you to meet him somewhere public and safe. Can you think of a place?" Jack was quiet for a moment, processing the urgency in her voice. When he spoke again, his tone had changed to the controlled calm of someone dealing with a crisis. "There's a 24-hour McDonald's on Grand River that's always busy, lots of witnesses. We can meet there." "Good. Pack light, only essentials. And Jack, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure you and Lily are safe no matter what it costs." "Emma, what are you planning?" "I'm planning to be brave," Emma said, thinking of Lily's words about princesses being defined by their hearts rather than their circumstances. "I'm planning to fight back." Emma's final call was to the number Rosa had given her or Tony's girlfriend at the Tribune. The reporter Maria Santos answered on the second ring, despite the late hour, her voice alert and professional. "Ms. Santos, my name is Emma Harrington, and I have evidence of criminal activity involving Harrington Industries that I believe you'd be interested in seeing." There was a pause, then Maria said carefully, "Ms. Harrington, I'm aware of your family's recent situation. Are you certain you want to speak to a reporter right now?" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." "Can you meet me somewhere in the next hour?" "I can be at the Tribune offices in 30 minutes. I'll see you there." Emma hung up the phone and sat in the diner for a moment, looking around at the ordinary people living their ordinary lives. Shift workers grabbing coffee, late-night travelers stretching their legs, insomniacs seeking refuge from sleepless nights. 6 weeks ago, she would have been invisible to these people just as they would have been invisible to her. Now she understood that they were the real world, the world she'd been kept from her entire life. Tomorrow that world would see exactly who Winston Harrington really was. The Tribune offices were mostly dark when Emma arrived, but Maria Santos was waiting in the lobby with a security guard and a photographer. Maria was younger than Emma had expected, maybe 30, with intelligent dark eyes, and the kind of focused intensity that suggested she'd been waiting her entire career for a story this big. "Ms. Harrington," Maria said, extending her hand, "I have to ask, are you prepared for what's going to happen when this story breaks?" Emma thought about the question as she shook Maria's hand. Was she prepared to see her father's empire crumble, to face the legal and social consequences of destroying one of Chicago's most powerful families, to accept that she might lose everything she'd ever known? "I'm prepared to tell the truth," Emma said. "Whatever happens after that, I can live with." They spent the next 4 hours going through the files Emma had stolen from Winston's computer, with Maria asking sharp, probing questions, while the photographer documented every piece of evidence. The scope of Winston's criminal activities was even worse than Emma had realized. Bribery, extortion, illegal campaign contributions, environmental violations that had been covered up with threats and payoffs. "This is incredible," Maria said as dawn light began filtering through the newsroom windows. "We're talking about federal charges, congressional investigations, potentially dozens of people going to prison." "Including me?" Emma asked. Maria looked at her thoughtfully. "You could face charges for stealing these files. But given that you're cooperating with law enforcement and exposing criminal activity, any prosecutor would be crazy to pursue you aggressively. More likely, you'll be offered immunity in exchange for your testimony." Emma nodded, accepting this possibility. Prison would be preferable to the gilded cage Winston had prepared for her, and infinitely preferable to a lifetime of knowing she'd allowed him to hurt innocent people. "When will the story run?" Emma asked. "Online in 2 hours, front page of tomorrow's print edition." "But Ms. Harrington..." "Emma, once this goes live, there's no taking it back. Your father will use every resource at his disposal to destroy you. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want to do?" Emma thought about Jack and Lily probably huddled in a McDonald's at that very moment, waiting for Mike to arrive and take them somewhere safe. She thought about Rosa, who had given her dignity and purpose when she had nothing. She thought about all the people Winston had hurt over the years, all the lives he'd destroyed to build his empire of greed and control. "I'm certain," Emma said. "Run the story." By noon, Emma Harrington was the most famous runaway heiress in America, and Winston Harrington was facing a federal investigation that would ultimately lead to a 20-year prison sentence. The engagement to James Whitmore was quietly dissolved. The merger between Harrington Industries and Whitmore Enterprises collapsed, and Emma found herself legally and financially independent for the first time in her life. More importantly, the threats against Jack and Lily disappeared overnight. With Winston in federal custody and his criminal network dismantled, they were finally safe to return to their normal lives. Emma spent the next 6 months testifying before grand juries, cooperating with federal investigators, and slowly learning how to live as a private citizen rather than a corporate asset. She rented a small apartment in Chicago, took a job at a nonprofit organization that helped domestic violence victims, and gradually built the kind of authentic life she'd glimpsed during her time in Portland. The work was meaningful in ways she hadn't expected, helping women escape abusive situations, connecting them with resources and support, using her own experience of psychological manipulation to provide guidance and hope. Emma discovered that her privileged background was actually an asset in this work, allowing her to understand the complex dynamics of power and control that kept victims trapped. But through it all, she thought constantly about the people she'd left behind in Detroit, wondering if Jack and Lily were safe, if they ever thought of her, if the love they'd shared during those 3 precious days had been real or just a product of extraordinary circumstances. The answer came on a crisp October morning, when Emma was walking to work through Chicago's Loop District. She was thinking about a particularly difficult case she was working on when she heard a voice that made her heart stop. "Excuse me, are you Emma Morrison?" Emma turned around slowly, hardly daring to believe what her ears were telling her. Jack stood on the sidewalk about 10 feet away, looking older and more weathered, but unmistakably himself. Beside him, holding his hand and grinning with the uncontainable joy that only 7-year-olds possessed, was Lily. "Daddy, it's her!" Lily exclaimed, tugging on Jack's sleeve. "It's Princess Emma!" Emma felt tears streaming down her face as she knelt to Lily's level, opening her arms just as the little girl launched herself forward in a fierce hug that nearly knocked them both over. "I knew you'd come back," Lily whispered against Emma's neck. "I knew the magic was real." Emma looked up at Jack over Lily's head, seeing in his eyes all the love and hope and possibility she'd been afraid to believe in. "How did you find me?" she asked. "Mike kept track of where you were through Rosa's nephew. We've been waiting for the right time when it was safe, when the dust had settled." Jack's smile was tentative but warm. "Lily insisted we had to come find you before her birthday next month. She said her birthday wish wouldn't work if she couldn't make it in person." "What's your birthday wish?" Emma asked, smoothing Lily's hair with trembling hands. "That you come home with us," Lily said matter-of-factly. "That we be a real family like we were supposed to be." Emma looked from Lily's hopeful face to Jack's uncertain one, seeing a future spread out before them like a roadmap to happiness. There would be challenges, long-distance complicated logistics, the ongoing aftermath of Winston's crimes. But there would also be love, the kind of love that had sustained her through 6 months of rebuilding her life. The kind of love that had brought them back to each other against all odds. "You know," Emma said, pulling both Jack and Lily into a hug that felt like coming home, "I think Portland might be a wonderful place to build a non-profit organization, especially with partners who understand what real family looks like." Jack's laugh was rich with relief and joy. "Are you sure, Emma, you've built a life here? Important work." "I've built skills here," Emma corrected, standing up but keeping hold of both their hands. "But life, real life, is wherever the people you love are waiting for you." 6 months later, Emma Morrison married Jack Morrison in a simple ceremony at Mama Rosa's restaurant, with Lily as maid of honor and half of Portland's nonprofit community in attendance. Rosa cried happy tears while serving the best Italian food anyone had ever tasted, and Mike gave a speech about the power of love to transform ordinary people into heroes. Emma wore Lily's original friendship bracelet alongside her wedding ring, and Jack's vows included a promise to love both the Emma who had been lost and the Emma who had found herself. Lily's flower girl duties were performed with the solemnity of someone who understood that some dreams really do come true if you believe in them hard enough. They honeymooned by taking Lily to Disney World, where Emma discovered that the Magic Kingdom had nothing on the magic of waking up every morning next to the people who loved her for exactly who she was. They rode roller coasters and ate cotton candy and stayed up late watching fireworks, 3 people who had found each other in the darkness and refused to let go. The nonprofit Emma established in Portland became one of the most successful victim advocacy organizations on the West Coast, funded partly by the settlement money she received from Winston's seized assets and partly by donations from people who believed in the work she was doing. She discovered that her experience as both victim and survivor gave her unique insights into the psychology of abuse and control, and her story became a powerful tool for helping other women find the courage to escape their own gilded cages. Jack returned to work in Portland's sanitation department, but he also became a volunteer coordinator for Emma's organization, using his natural empathy and practical wisdom to help male victims of domestic violence, a population that was often overlooked but desperately needed support and understanding. Lily thrived in Portland's creative, accepting environment, developing interests in art and music and science with the enthusiastic support of parents who encouraged her to explore every possibility. She never forgot that she had been the one to first recognize Emma's princess qualities, and she took credit for the happy ending with the pride of someone who had always believed that love was the most powerful magic of all. On quiet Sunday mornings, the 3 of them would sometimes visit the food cart they eventually opened together, Morrison Family Kitchen, specializing in comfort food, made with love and served with dignity. It wasn't the Harrington Empire, but it was theirs, built with their own hands, and sustained by their commitment to treating every customer like family. Emma would watch Jack teach Lily how to make pancakes from scratch, or see them working together to serve meals to Portland's homeless community, and she would remember the frightened girl who had once hidden in a Detroit alley, convinced that she had nothing to offer the world. That girl had been wrong. She had had everything to offer, she just needed to find people worthy of receiving it. 5 years after their wedding, as Emma tucked 8-year-old Lily into bed in the house they'd bought together in Portland's Alberta district, Lily asked the question that had become their nightly ritual. "Mama Emma, tell me the story about how you became a real princess." Emma settled beside her daughter, because that's what Lily had become in every way that mattered, and began the story the way she always did. Once upon a time, there was a girl who thought she had to be perfect to be loved. She lived in a beautiful castle, but she was very lonely because she didn't know how to be herself. One stormy night, she decided to be brave and go looking for her real family. As Emma told the familiar story, editing it appropriately for a child's ears, but maintaining its essential truth, Jack appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with the expression of contentment that had become his default setting. Their eyes met over Lily's head, and Emma saw reflected there the same wonder she felt every day. Amazement that love could be so simple, so generous, so transformative. And they all lived happily ever after. Emma concluded, kissing Lily's forehead, as the little girl's eyes drifted closed. "The best kind of ever after," Lily mumbled sleepily. "The kind where everyone gets to choose their own story." Emma turned off the light and joined Jack in the hallway, slipping her hand into his as they walked toward their own bedroom. Through the windows, they could see the lights of Portland spread out below them, like stars fallen to earth, each one representing someone's story, someone's dreams, someone's hope for tomorrow. "Any regrets?" Jack asked softly, the question he posed sometimes, when the quiet of evening made them both reflective. Emma considered it seriously, as she always did. She thought about the life she'd left behind, the wealth she'd given up, the simplicity she'd traded for the beautiful complexity of real love. "Only one," she said finally. Jack raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I regret that it took me so long to find my way home." Jack's smile was answer enough, and as they settled into bed together in the house they'd bought with money Emma earned from honest work, surrounded by the evidence of a life they'd built together through choice rather than obligation, Emma Morrison closed her eyes and knew that she had finally truly become real. Outside Portland slept peacefully, and somewhere in the distance a lone saxophone played a jazz melody that sounded like freedom, like possibility, like the kind of love that changes everything it touches. The poor single dad who had once let a strange girl stay for one night had discovered that sometimes strangers carry miracles disguised as problems, and that the richest lives are built not with money, but with courage, kindness, and the revolutionary act of loving someone exactly as they are. In the morning, they would wake up together and start another ordinary day in their extraordinary life. 3 people who had found each other in the storm and created shelter that would last forever.